Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Miles. Sandra was born on May 26, 1949, in the small, cozy town of Harn, Kansas, USA. She had a close relationship with her sister. They attended the same school, walked together, and spent time with their family. After graduating from high school, Sandra focused on starting a family. She was in a serious relationship with her boyfriend, and they decided to get married. They welcomed a son named Chad. Unfortunately, the marriage did not work out. Sandra quickly realized that her husband was not the right match for her. After the divorce, Sandra found another partner, but that relationship also ended in disappointment, leading her to break up with him as well. In 1976, Sandra, a single mother, got a job at a factory that made pumps and pistons for industrial machinery. This job required her family to relocate to a larger city, Hutchison. In her new position, Sandra proved herself and gained the respect of management through her hard work and responsibility. She performed her tasks exceptionally well. It was during this time that she met her third husband, Jerry Miles. They were instantly attracted to each other, and their friendship quickly blossomed into romance, leading to their decision to marry. Their marriage happened rapidly, but it was evident that Jerry and Sandra truly loved each other and were eager to get married. A year later, Sandra was expecting a baby with her new husband. In September of that year, they welcomed their daughter, Tracy, who brought immense joy to her parents, especially Sandra, who had always dreamed of having a large family. During this time, their marriage appeared to be perfect. The couple had a strong bond and prioritized their family above all else. Jerry's children regularly communicated with him and participated in family events. He particularly enjoyed spending time with Tracy at the nearby lake. To outsiders, their marriage appeared perfect. However, only close friends and family knew of the underlying issue. After 7 years of marriage, Sandra could no longer endure her husband's alcoholism. This revelation shocked many, as she had previously concealed the problem. Sandra ultimately chose to end her marriage to her third husband, Jerry, and raise their children by herself. She thought Jerry was a kind man when he was sober, but he had difficulty managing his drinking. When he drank, he became a completely different person. At first, he was able to control his drinking, but over time, his alcoholism became more and more evident. His relapses became more frequent, placing a heavy burden on Sandra. She worked every day at the factory to support the family and eventually became exhausted from the thing. Sandra always saw Jerry as a wonderful husband and father. Their relationship ended because he struggled with alcohol addiction. Even so, she continued to support their children while maintaining her job. This was a challenging time for her, but she was determined not to give up and managed to handle the difficulties well. Jerry offered some help, but when he succumbed to alcohol again, Sandra had to face all the challenges alone. Despite this, she stayed confident in her abilities and was driven to ensure her children had a bright future and everything they needed for a fulfilling life. It was certainly challenging, but Sandra Miles was not one to give up easily. She remained a conscientious mother, spending all her free time with her children. Despite facing difficulties, she handled them with grace, which brought her closer to her daughter Tracy during this time. Her son had grown up, moved out, and started his own life, but Tracy continues to support her mother because she realizes that Sandra's efforts are mainly to benefit her. In the spring of 1997, Sandra's relationship with Tracy, her 16-year-old daughter, began to deteriorate. Tracy has started dating her first boyfriend and is going through the rebellious phase that is common in adolescence. Sandra tried to improve their relationship. She thought her daughter's problems were only temporary. At the same time, Sandra was mindful of her own past failed marriages and felt the need to caution Tracy about the mistakes she made in her youth. Tracy's affection for her mother faded quickly, leading to a strained relationship between them. To win her daughter's love, Sandra bought Tracy a Black Moon car, which Tracy had longed for. This gift excited Tracy. She adored her car and made a point to arrive first at school every day so everyone would notice it. It seemed like Tracy had a bright future ahead, and she represented hope for Sandra. Sandra was determined to do whatever it took to help her daughter succeed. However, fate can be cruel. On March 20th, Sandra's son Chad and his girlfriend Mindy visited her with exciting news. Mindy was pregnant. Sandra was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother and eagerly anticipated the birth of her grandson. Unfortunately, Sandra would not live to see that moment. While Sandra's sister, Pat Douglas Butler, was having breakfast with her husband, she received an urgent call from Sandra's workplace. Sandra's employer reported that Sandra had been absent for 5 days. Concerned for her well-being, the boss tried to contact her but was unable to reach her. Pat also hadn't heard from her during this time, as they didn't typically call each other every day. Worried, Pat and her husband decided to visit Sandra's house to check if she was okay or if she needed help. When Pat and her husband arrived, they found the door locked and the house appeared deserted. This was strange because Sandra lived there with her daughter, Tracy, who was usually very active and should have been home at that time. Then, Pat and her husband went to the school to look for Tracy. The teachers were confused as Tracy had also been absent for several days. The class teacher, Noni, tried to call the family, but no one answered. Alarmed by the situation, Pat decided to call the police to report the disappearance of both Sandra and Tracy. The officers took Pat's statement and assessed the situation. When they arrived, Pat was waiting for them and handed over a spare key to the front door that she had kept. Law enforcement officers entered the house and immediately detected a strong, unpleasant smell of decomposition, unmistakable in nature. The experienced patrol officers recognized the importance of preserving the crime scene to protect the evidence, so they called for backup. When additional police officers arrived, they discovered the decomposed body of a woman lying on her bed, covered with a blanket. Upon removing the blanket, they found a power cord from a household appliance wrapped around her neck, indicating she likely died from strangulation. Additionally, there were multiple injuries visible on her face and head. Due to the severe level of decomposition, the victim's identity could not be immediately determined. It was unclear how many blows she had suffered or what exactly was hit with, but it was clear that her death was not natural, it was a murder. A forensic medical examination was needed to understand the details surrounding her death. However, dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sandra Miles. Besides, they could not find Tracy in the house, indicating that she was missing. At first, detectives thought Tracy might also be a victim of the same attacker. They searched the house thoroughly, but found no evidence suggesting she had been harmed like her mother. It was possible that Tracy had been kidnapped, placing her in great danger and requiring immediate action. She was added to the missing persons list, and the search for her began. It was unclear who would wish harm on Sandra, a woman who devoted her life to creating a future for her children. When Detective Hutchison began investigating the case, they considered every possibility, including neighbors and her ex-husband. The aim was to uncover who had a motive for the murder of 48-year-old Sandra Miles and the disappearance of Tracy. Sandra's family, sister, son, and ex-husband were quickly informed of the tragic news. All were in shock. Sandra seemed to have no enemies and was known as a kind and gentle person who worked hard to overcome life's difficulty and support her daughter. It was hard to believe anyone could be so cruel to someone defenseless. Tracy's brother, Chad, made an appeal through the newspaper, asking locals to help find Tracy, his only surviving family member who had been taken from him. Forensic experts have revealed harrowing details of Sandra's last moments. Sandra had been knocked to the ground by repeated blows to her head with a blunt object. While she was incapacitated, a power cord was used to strangle her. The presence of large bruises and internal bleeding indicated she endured a prolonged and violent assault. The medical examiner believed there were likely at least 2 attackers. Investigators suggested that the incident was a robbery gone wrong, possibly triggered when Sandra confronted the intruders as they attempted to steal from her home. Sandra might have seen them, then a fight broke out, and they murdered her because they were afraid she would report to the police. However, after inspecting the crime scene, detectives found this scenario unlikely. There were no signs of a break-in, and the house lost nothing, except Tracy's favorite car. It didn't make sense to commit murder for the sake of theft. The brutality of the Sandra's injuries was notable. An ordinary robber wouldn't have wasted time with strangulation, they would have shot her to avoid confrontation. The severe damage to her upper body indicated that the injuries were not a result of panic from being caught, but rather a deliberate attack meant to kill. This level of cruelty suggested a culmination of a long-standing feud. Another possibility considered was that of a maniacal attacker, but generally, such individuals act alone. This crime, however, was clearly carried out by multiple people given the severity of the injuries. Now, the killers had taken Tracy captive, making it urgent to locate the criminals. The detectives believed that Sandra had willingly let her attackers into the house, as there were no signs of forced entry. Therefore, they recognized the need to continue the investigation. The police contacted all of Sandra's relatives, friends, neighbors, and co-workers as part of their investigation. The police focused particularly on her ex-husbands, as they might have motives rooted in resentment. Sandra's third husband, Jerry, who struggled with alcoholism, drew significant attention. He may have been unhappy after the divorce, and the detective speculated that he could have confronted Sandra while intoxicated, possibly leading to her death. However, the detectives to find that he had an alibi, so he was removed from the list of suspects. Police interviewed all of Sandra's acquaintances to identify suspects in the violent massacre and possibly Tracy's kidnapping. Sandra's sister, Pat, informed detectives that she last saw Sandra alive 5 days earlier. On that day, she received a work call around the same time Tracy visited the school where she studied, making it a key date in the investigation. Efforts to gather information from friends and acquaintances were unproductive. So detectives turned to the neighbors. They discovered that the neighborhood was peaceful and close-knit, where everyone was familiar with one another. The next day, news of the incident at Sandra's house spread quickly. A crowd gathered in the yard and driveway, prompting the police to restrict access to the area. Many neighbors stopped by out of curiosity, anxious to learn what had happened. There was a growing concern in everyone, as they realized a dangerous killer, and possibly a kidnapper, was still at large, especially since there had been no word from Tracy. Fortunately, some witnesses in the crowd provided valuable information to the detectives. A neighbor who lived directly across the street reported seeing Tracy about 5 days earlier, on March 25th. He had noticed her with 2 young men. They all got into one of the guy's cars and drove away, and he never saw them again. This account raised questions about the nature of Tracy's disappearance, as it didn't fit the typical scenario of a schoolgirl being kidnapped. The friends, identified as Mark and Jay, lived nearby, so the detectives decided to interview them at their homes. Mark quickly left as several police officers spotted a red car in the distance. When Mark noticed the police approaching, he sped away and vanished at high speed. This behavior seemed suspicious, so one of the detectives alerted the patrol nearby about his direction. Mark wouldn't have fled so rapidly if he weren't trying to hide something from the police. Luckily, it didn't take long for them to catch up. Mark was eventually stopped just a few kilometers from his home. Mark was driving his car with a friend who was anxious about the recent tragedy at Sandra's house. The two young men attempted to convince the police that their fear was the only reason for their unusual behavior, but seasoned detectives sensed they were hiding something. Consequently, both were taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, the young men insisted they were merely frightened by the news of the incident at the Miles residence. Their stories closely matched, but the police found no solid evidence against them, so they were released. However, they became important witnesses because the police were aware that Tracy had recently been in a relationship with a young man named Jeremy Bell. They also knew that Sandra disapproved of him, believing he would have a negative impact on her daughter's life. Eventually, Tracy broke up with Jeremy and started dating Paul Nelson. Several witnesses stated that shortly before the tragedy, Tracy had a significant argument with her mother over Jeremy and Paul, both of whom Sandra disapproved. Detectives began interviewing numerous teenagers connected to this group. It was established that Tracy's ex, Jeremy, had a volatile temperament and had even made threats against Paul. However, Paul was not the main reason for Tracy and Jeremy's breakup. That was largely due to Sandra's disapproval, which may have prompted Jeremy's hostility toward her. In fact, the relationship between Sandra and Jeremy was extremely strained. Sandra had to go to the police station to obtain a restraining order against Jeremy. He accused her of ruining his relationship with her daughter, Tracy, and threatened her, although he never acted on these threats. During drunken parties, he often expressed how much Sandra bothered him to his friends. Sandra was determined to protect her daughter from him, which only led to more conflicts. It was known that Jeremy was already on the police's radar due to his numerous violations, and the restraining order worsened the situation. He clearly held a grudge against Sandra, which raised concerns that he could have kidnapped Tracy. At this point, detectives believed that Jeremy had killed Sandra and was now holding Tracy captive. They decided to question Jeremy, who, along with his friend William Lennon, had been arrested for burglary on the 1st of the month, just a few days before Sandra's murder. Since Jeremy was in prison during the time of the murder, he could not have been involved in Sandra's death. The fate of Tracy remained uncertain. The kidnapper had not made any demands, leading the police to fear that she might already be dead, although there was still a chance she was being held hostage. Time was of the essence for her safety. When investigators spoke with Jeremy in prison, he explained that he was not in a relationship with Tracy at the time of Sandra's murder due to a restraining order that required him to avoid contact with her. As a result, they broke up. During this time, Tracy began dating another man, Paul Nelson, which led Jeremy to distance himself from her. The police noticed that Jeremy appeared to strongly dislike Paul and openly expressed a desire to confront. Jeremy accused Paul of encouraging Tracy to engage in criminal behavior and worried that she might become involved with drugs because of her relationship with him. However, he stated that he did not harbor any ill feelings toward Sandra. In fact, their communication improved once Tracy started dating Paul. As Sandra shifted her anger towards Paul, Jeremy supported Sandra during this time. On March 25th, just before Sandra's murder, Jeremy warned Tracy about her new boyfriend, Paul, whom he considered dangerous. By that time, the autopsy results were complete. The medical examiner determined that Sandra died on March 26 from 4 stab wounds and significant blunt force trauma to the head. These injuries were confirmed as the cause of death, and strangulation was also used to ensure she was dead. The police needed to locate Paul Nelson, the main suspect, to question him. However, he was missing. His parents reported that he hadn't been seen since March 26. Like Tracy, detectives believed he was involved in Sandra's murder. They needed to find him and uncover what happened to Tracy, but they could only address that after detaining he. Investigators discovered that Paul had been in regular contact with his friend Zwickel, with whom he had lived before going into hiding. When detectives spoke with Zwickel, he provided valuable information. He confirmed that Sandra did not approve of the relationship between Tracy and Paul. Sandra believed that Paul, Tracy's new boyfriend, was a bad influence and was trying to get her involved with drugs. Despite Sandra's objections, Tracy and Paul continued to meet secretly. After several weeks, Sandra found out about it and was upset. She told her daughter that getting involved with a drug addict was a big mistake. Despite this, she refused to face the truth. Her mother urged her to end the relationship with Paul. Sandra then informed Tracy that if she wanted a family and children, she would need to move in with Paul. This news surprised both Tracy and Paul, as they had nowhere to live. Sandra advised Tracy to think about ending her pregnancy, and Tracy consented. However, their relationship worsened after the abortion. A shocking moment for Tracy was when Sandra threatened to take her car keys if she didn't end her relationship with Paul. This tension may have led Paul to develop a grudge against Sandra, who he and Tracy saw as an obstacle to their relationship. Paul's friend, Zwickle, reported that on March 26, Paul returned home around 10 a.m. and immediately began packing his belongings. Paul mentioned that he was planning to leave with Tracy and that they had $2,000, which he believed would be sufficient for their escape. Paul confided in Zwickle that he and Tracy intended to run away in her car, and Zwickle assumed they were fleeing due to a disagreement. However, Paul did not mention Sandra's death to Zwickle. When Zwickle inquired about how Paul obtained the money, he claimed he had sold Sandra's tape recorder to a pawn shop. It was later discovered that tape recorder had indeed gone missing from the house after the attack. In reality, Paul was not being truthful. Selling tape recorder only netted him less than $50. It remained unclear how Paul could have acquired such a significant amount of money at that time. Afterwards, Zwickle noticed how Paul and Tracy got into a car and drove away without any signs of stress. It seemed they were heading to Mexico. Given the situation, Zwickle began to suspect that Paul might be involved in a murder. As a result, Paul and Tracy were placed on a nationwide wanted list. Investigators in Kansas identified 18-year-old Paul Nelson as the prime suspect. The police were particularly troubled by the $2,000 Paul had, which he used to flee. They wondered if he had robbed someone or committed another crime. Investigators were shocked and they examined Sandra's bank accounts. On March 26, her daughter, Tracy, withdrew money from her mother's account. While looking into this, detectives discovered that Tracy had gone to the bank with Paul and cashed a check with the teller. Tracy claimed that her mother had given her the money to buy a new car. This raised serious suspicions about her actions. A bank employee reported that Tracy and Paul were calm during the transaction and showed no signs of worry. Amid suspicions that Tracy may have been a hostage in a kidnapping, police now have new suspicions. It seemed Paul's friend, Zwickle, was telling the truth. Could Tracy actually be a willing participant in the crime instead of a hostage? To investigate further, they reached out to Tracy's best friend, Candace Keno. Candace revealed that on March 25, Tracy had called her to share that a serious conflict had erupted with her mother. Tracy's mother had taken the car key away from her and threatened to kick her out. This created evident hostility between them. Candace mentioned that following this incident, Tracy decided to run away with Paul and admitted this during their phone conversation. The officers' doubts were confirmed. It became clear that from the very beginning, no one had actually tried to keep Tracy as a hostage. The police confirmed that Tracy and Paul had crossed the border into Mexico and subsequently got lost. After some time, a United States Border Service officer informed the police that Tracy and Paul had re-entered the U.S. near El Paso. The reason for their return was unclear, but it was evident that they were in trouble. Efforts to locate the couple intensified. On April 8, Candace contacted investigators to report that she had spoken with Tracy on the phone. Candace provided the police with Tracy's phone number. Tracy and Paul was located on the outskirts of El Paso, and later, that day, investigators apprehended Paul. Candace agreed to make another call to help detectives pinpoint the location from which Tracy had called. Tracy and Paul was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. Paul did not appear to be a dangerous gangster. He kept his eyes on the floor and trembled with fear. He explained the details of the attack, admitting that on the evening of the 25th, he had gone to the house Sandra's. Then, Tracy and Paul had devised an escape plan, and it was Tracy who proposed drastic measures. She wanted to kill her mother to prevent her from ever finding her. The next morning, Candace stopped by to pick up Tracy, and they left for school together. Meanwhile, Paul was hiding in the bedroom with a tree branch he intended to use as a weapon. He claimed he found it in the house and did not plan to kill Sandra. He only wanted to strike her so she would lose consciousness. However, the police were skeptical of his explanation. They questioned why he would sneak into the house and attack her if he didn't intend to kill her, knowing she could eventually regain consciousness and report him. It seemed clear to the investigators that his intention was murder, which would allow him to escape without being caught. Paul continued his story. He claimed that Sandra surprised him by opening the door and immediately began yelling and insulting him. In a fit of anger, he wrapped a cord around Sandra's neck and strangled her until she stopped breathing. Afterward, he covered she with a blanket and fled the scene. Meanwhile, Tracy, smiling, testified in the next room. Their accounts were similar, except for how much blame they placed on each other. Tracy asserted that she did not act alone. She claimed that she and Paul planned the murder together, but only Paul killed her mother. Tracy insisted that she had no role in the crime. She also revealed that the wooden figurine used in the murder was hidden in the backyard. The police later found the figurine there, along with Sandra's blood on it. The prosecutor's office was prepared to charge Tracy and Paul with first-degree murder. According to state law, the maximum penalty for this crime was life imprisonment. Paul's defense argued that he acted under Tracy's influence, claiming he should be guilty of manslaughter instead. Conversely, Tracy's lawyer argued that Paul was the instigator, as he was the one who strangled Sandra, while Tracy played a secondary role. The trial began on February 26, 1999, with both defense teams trying to downplay their clients' involvement in the horrific crime to lessen their possible sentences. During the trial, the young defendants, Tracy and Paul, displayed disrespectful behavior and laughed provocatively. Tracy refused to meet with her family, even though they wanted to discuss her involvement in Sandra's murder. Her brother, Chad, particularly wished to speak with her. On April 22, 1999, the court sentenced Tracy Miles and Paul Nelson to life in prison, with a minimum of 25 years before they can apply for parole. After the judge announced the sentence, Paul made an obscene gesture. Both Tracy and Paul expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict and showed no signs of remorse for their actions. In the future, Tracy and Paul will have the chance to request early release, but Sandra's relatives hope that this does not occur. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier J.B. After her parents divorced in 1984, J.B. moved to Dothan with her mother. Her mother later married Joey Begun, who became J.B.'s loving stepfather, and she and her 4 sisters grew up in a house in Dothan. She was an outgoing girl who enjoyed a variety of activities, including cheerleading, dance lessons, playing the piano, and swimming. J.B. and her sisters also modeled for several companies. During high school, she met Tracy Hallett, with whom she quickly formed a close friendship. Tracy was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett, a police officer with the Dothan Police Department. Her life took a dramatic turn when her father died when Tracy was 5 years old. Her mother then married Mike Roberts, who raised Tracy with her mother. Unlike her friend J.B., Tracy was shy but always put others before herself. As the eldest in the family, she took her responsibilities very seriously, especially when it came to her 2 younger brothers. Tracy attended Northview High School, excelling in her studies and participating in extracurricular activities as a cheerleader, often with J.B. As the 2 girls began to enter adulthood, they had no idea of the tragic fate that awaited them. On July 31, 1999, J.B. and Tracy set off from Dothan in J.B.'s 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party in Headland, a town just a few miles north. However, unfamiliar with the roads, the 2 young women soon found themselves in trouble. Just minutes after starting their journey from home, they became lost. At approximately 10:30 p.m., J.B. and Tracy stopped at a BP gas station in Headland to ask for directions. The gas station was located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431. Using the pay phone at the gas station, they called their friends to get a better idea of how to get to the party. However, after driving on, J.B. and Tracy found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, instead of their intended destination. Still confused about the directions, the girls stopped at the Big Little store at 11:30 p.m. Although the store was closed, they used the pay phone to make another call. This time, Tracy called her mother to tell them they were lost in Ozark and planning to return home. A woman, Marilyn Merritt, and her daughters then stopped at a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy and J.B. approached them and asked for directions to Dothan. Marilyn explained the route as best she could, and the girls seemed to understand. She found the girls polite and well-mannered and noted that their car was clean. Marilyn recalled that the girls left the parking lot and turned right, as she had instructed. However, at that time, J.B. and Tracy had not returned home. The next morning, August 1, 1999, around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Police soon discovered their first clue regarding the girl's disappearance. After Tracy was reported missing, police found J.B.'s car on Herring Avenue in Ozark. What was unusual about the discovery was that the car's gas tank, which had been full the day before, was now nearly empty. The car showed signs of having been driven in muddy conditions, but the doors had been locked, although the driver's side window was partially rolled down. There was no evidence of forced entry. Inside, police found J.B.'s driver's license on the dashboard, as well as the girls' wallets, which still contained cash. However, the car keys were missing, and neither Tracy nor J.B. were found. A fingerprint on the locked trunk lid led police to believe something was seriously wrong. As they surveyed the scene, they suspected the trunk might contain vital clues but were hampered by the lack of a key. However, after 6 hours of investigation, they found an interior latch that allowed them to open the trunk without a key. When police opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of 2 girls inside. Both victims were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head. An autopsy revealed that Tracy had been shot in the temple, while J.B. had been shot in the right cheek. Tracy's body also showed a 9mm shell casing in her leg, scratches on her arm, and spikes stuck in her jeans. J.B.'s clothes, especially her new shoes, were muddy and dirty. Police discovered that the 2 girls had likely been shot inside the trunk, although initial signs suggested an execution-style killing. After notifying their families of the discovery, an official murder investigation was launched. Police found the girls' wallets, jewelry, money, and credit cards still in the car, indicating that this was not a robbery. Autopsies revealed no alcohol or drugs in the victims' systems. Additionally, The autopsies confirmed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before her death, ruling out a sexual motive. 2 months after Tracy and JB's murders, the state crime lab released a report revealing the presence of unidentified semen on JB's clothing and skin. Despite this new evidence, the fingerprints found on the trunk lid remained a mystery, as there was no match in the database. With no clear leads, the investigation stalled. As news of the girls' deaths spread rapidly, police still had few leads to identify a suspect. A reward was also offered to try to gather information related to the murders, but no new leads were discovered. However, police soon received an unexpected breakthrough in the case. A month after the discovery of JB and Tracy's bodies, Johnny William Barentine, 28, a longtime resident of Ozark, came forward to the local police department on September 1st. Johnny claimed to have witnessed the girls' murders. He testified that on the night of the murders, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son around the time Tracy called from the Big Little Store pay phone. At 1 a.m., Johnny returned home visibly upset and initially told his wife that he had been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. However, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny gave 6 different accounts of what he knew. He initially told Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey that he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls' bodies were discovered. Unfortunately, his story continued to change and contradict throughout the interviews. Johnny initially claimed that he picked up a tattooed stranger and drove to the Big Little Store. He later said that the stranger got into a car with 2 girls, whom he recognized as the 2 girls who were later found dead. Johnny said that the group drove to Herring Avenue, where the stranger forced the girls out of the car, leading to a struggle as the girls tried to escape. According to Johnny's statement, after witnessing a confrontation, he saw something in the stranger's hand just before hearing 2 gunshots. Johnny then drove the stranger away from the scene before returning home. However, in a conflicting version of events, Johnny admitted to police that he actually knew the stranger he picked up, identifying him as a neighbor who lived nearby. Notably, Johnny's home was less than a mile from where police discovered the victims' bodies. Johnny's story was not convincing to police, and he became the prime suspect in the murders of JB and Tracy. As a result, Ozark police quickly arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of attempted murder. However, several issues with his testimony raised suspicions. Notably, Johnny did not mention any sexual activity that would explain the presence of semen on JB's clothes and body. Additionally, the neighbor he accused had a solid alibi for the time. Johnny initially confessed to making up the entire story to collect the reward money. Despite his admission, the police believed they had the right suspect. At a preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny accurately described the victim's clothing and other relevant details, indicating that he was indeed present at the crime scene. Then, at a bail hearing on October 18th, Johnny gave another testimony. He proclaimed his innocence, saying that he never picked up a man with a tattoo or witnessed anything on the night of the murder. According to Johnny, he went to the store around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his son and then made up the story to get a reward. The judge denied him bail and he was sent back to the Dale County Jail in Ozark. Throughout this time, Johnny's family members remained supportive of him. They gave interviews to the media, expressing their belief in his innocence and stating that he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny's attorney, Bill Kimmons, argued that his client had no involvement in the murders of Tracy and JB, emphasizing that the 4-hour interrogation had affected Johnny, who was trapped in his own false confession. Johnny's defense also pointed out that he had only completed 7th grade and part of 8th grade. He said his client was in special education, suggesting he was incapable of planning the heinous crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that Johnny's DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. As a result, He was released from prison on December 17, 1999. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict Johnny, officially clearing him of any suspects in the murders of Tracy and JB. This development led to a setback in the investigation, with criticism directed at the police methods used and doubts raised about the Ozark Police's ability to handle the case. However, police continued to focus on other potential suspects. During the investigation, a man from Michigan was identified as the prime suspect. He had attended a party the night of the murders near the area and JB's car was later found. The man had left town shortly after the murders, raising suspicion. Police interviewed him 3 times in Michigan but were unable to provide a clear explanation for the 3 to 4 hour gap in his alibi for the night of the murder. However, these statements were never made public by police. The case against him was eventually dropped after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Another key lead police are investigating is the driver of a small white pickup truck that was spotted at the Big Little store. Security footage captured the truck at the gas station when JB and Tracy stopped to call Tracy's mother from a payphone. The video quality was poor and did not show the driver or anyone getting in or out of the truck. It was impossible to follow a digital trail, as there was no record of gas being purchased at the gas station at the time. After releasing photos of the truck to the media, police asked the public for information, but as leads went cold, the driver and truck were never found. The last potential lead was a Mississippi man who had been extradited to Ozark from Jones County on an unrelated charge of possession of drug paraphernalia. The man had stayed with relatives in Ozark for a short time before leaving town 2 days after the murder, prompting police to question him. However, the questioning yielded no significant information and, without evidence, they were forced to release him. A woman contacted police in March 2000, reporting that she had heard screaming and 2 gunshots on the night of July 31, 1999, near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits. When asked about her delayed report, she explained that she feared being implicated. Police searched the area thoroughly based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used in the murders of Tracy and JB. However, the make of the bullet did not match the brand of the shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, the bullet had no markings that could be used to forensically compare it to other evidence in the case. Unfortunately, this lead ended up being another dead end for the police. Several leads in the JB and Tracy case eventually ran into dead ends, but police were determined to find a DNA match. As JB and Tracy's grieving families tried to move on with their lives, the case went cold. Years later, however, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. A major breakthrough came in 2015 when Rena, an auxiliary Ozark police officer, came forward and publicly accused an Ozark police officer of killing JB and Tracy and others of covering up the incident. Rena made several serious allegations related to a 1999 incident in Ozark. According to her, a police officer stopped a man named JB on the night of July 31, 1999, looking for cassette tapes containing recordings of conversations. These tapes allegedly implicated Ozark police officers in a cocaine distribution and profiteering scheme. Rena asserted that the search for the tapes ultimately led to the murders of the 2 innocent girls. Rena further alleged that several law enforcement officers knew the identity of the killer but chose to cover it up by destroying evidence. They also allegedly threatened her to keep her from speaking out. She specifically named 3 police officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as harassing and threatening her. Rena further accused then-police Chief Tony Spivey, who led the initial investigation, of being involved in the cover-up. However, she did not reveal the identity of the specific police officer she believed was responsible for the murders. Noted American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article discussing the case. John B. believes that the officer involved thought that Tracy and JB would use the tapes as evidence in a trial scheduled for August 2, 1999, just 48 hours after they were killed. However, John B. also claims that Rena was severely beaten with a baseball bat after speaking out, which prevented her from naming the real killer. The officers Rena accused all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracy. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever officially named as suspects in the case. Regardless, the allegations exploded on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officers, filed a defamation of character lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of molesting JB's sister and was given a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Over the years, police investigated multiple theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It took 20 years and the advancement of new DNA technology before police were able to make an arrest. In March 2019, police sent DNA found on JB's body in clothing to Virginia-based Parabon Nano Laboratories, which specializes in DNA. Using a public genealogical database to analyze the suspect's DNA and match it to genetic information led police to a breakthrough in the case. The new evidence linked DNA found at the crime scene to a suspect named Coley McCraney, a man in his 40s. At the time, Coley was not a suspect in the 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett, but the discovery changed everything. Coley, an Alabama native, had led a relatively normal life before his DNA linked him to the crimes. Born in Alabama, Coley attended and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an accomplished athlete and served as president of the school's library club. After completing high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. Coley's personal life involved several marriages. He married his first wife in 1992 but separated 2 years later and eventually divorced. During this time, his ex-wife accused him of assault and filed a complaint with the Air Force. After the divorce, Coley remarried in 2001 and started a family with his second wife. With the exception of a child support issue in 1998, Coley has no prior criminal record or criminal history. Coley spent 20 years as a truck driver for various companies in Alabama. In addition to his trucking career, he recently co-founded a church and served as a bishop. At the time of the murders, Coley was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where J.B. and Tracy's bodies were discovered in 1999. 20 years after the murders, Coley was arrested on March 19, 2019, following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama. During an interview with police, Coley claimed that he did not know J.B. and Tracy. Police did not provide any information about his possible motive. Coley's arrest took the Ozark community by surprise, especially Police Chief Marlon Walker, who attended school with him. Rena Crum, 53, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the killings, withdrew her charges at a hearing in August 2022. Coley McCraney, 49, is facing 5 counts of attempted murder for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett and is being held without bail in the Dale County Jail ahead of his trial, which is scheduled for April 17, 2023. At trial, Coley admitted that he knew J.B. He had a conversation with J.B. several weeks before the killings in which she introduced herself as Jennifer at the Wiregrass Commons Mall. He testified that on the day of the killings, he and J.B. had consensual sex in his truck. He said he never knew that Jennifer was J.B. Beasley. On April 26, 2023, a jury found Coley McCraney guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. In July 2023, a Dale County District Court judge denied Coley's request for a new trial. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rudolph Farias. On March 7, 2015, Rudolph Farias walks with his two dogs. Afternoon, his two dogs came back separately to the front door of their home, dragging their leashes, but Rudolph was missing. Despite this, Janie relentlessly followed every small lead to find her son, but she was unsuccessful. Even with the many recent tragedies in the Santana family, Janie stayed determined in her belief that her son would be found. Speculation emerged that Rudolph's disappearance could be connected to his biological father. Rudolph's father, who was a law enforcement officer, was found dead from a gunshot wound in his patrol car. Before this, Rudolph's older brother had died in a car accident, and now Rudolph has vanished, leaving very little evidence to track him down. Janie, a resolute mother, was steadfast in not giving in to hopelessness. She took an active role in online forums to ensure her son's name and case stayed in the spotlight, hoping his story would not fade into obscurity. She believed that his disappearance might be linked to human trafficking and criticized the state police for their lack of action. Janie suggested there could be complicity within the law enforcement community, potentially shielding criminals and avoiding conflicts with powerful individuals. Ever since Janie started speaking out about the issue of human trafficking, she felt her safety was at risk. Her fears were confirmed when Rudolph's uncle, Jerry, died in a motorcycle accident on the second anniversary of his nephew's disappearance. Jerry had been actively involved in the search for the young man. On National Missing Persons Day, he gave an emotional speech about Rudolph's generous nature and compassion for others, highlighting the pain of a mother who has lost her child. Jerry never directly said that Rudolph had been harmed, but shortly before his unexpected death, he contacted the owner of a local social media outlet called Voice of Houston. This was a platform the family often used. Jerry wanted to schedule a meeting to share important information about Rudolph's case, which was planned for a week later. Sadly, Jerry died just a day before the meeting, suggesting he might have discovered sensitive information he wasn't supposed to. As interest in Rudolph's disappearance waned due to a lack of concrete evidence, Janie, with the help of volunteers and family members, created T-shirts with her son's image and shared his photos online. On the evening of June 29, 2023, a 911 emergency call reported finding an unconscious and injured young man outside the Immaculate Heart Church. That was a man in his 20s with minor injuries and bruises. After getting the emergency call, the law enforcement agents were uncertain about the man's identity. When he regained consciousness, the man was silenced, showed signs of fear and confusion, and had no ID or wallet. However, a crucial clue found in his pocket helped solve the mystery. Authorities identified the man as Rudolph Farias and contacted his mother, Janie Santana, to inform her. Janie recognized her son by his eyes and confirmed his identity, she quickly moving to his side and staying there constantly. After 8 years of despair, Rudolph's return felt almost miraculous to his family. Although he had not yet spoken to the authorities, it was expected that, once he was settled and at ease with his family, he would share his memory and explain how he ended up near the church, miles from home. Rudolph showed signs of physical distress, including leg ulcers, various cuts and bruises, and dried blood in his hair. However, these injuries could be treated. Janie took to her social media to thank everyone who helped keep the search for Rudolph ongoing. She acknowledged that she didn't have any new information about his whereabouts during the missing years but was committed to supporting his recovery, his health. She mentioned that trying to discuss his past made him withdraw, become silent, and curl into a fetal position. Despite this, Janie was deeply grateful that her son had returned after such a long time away. Rudolph always kept a pendant of his late brother with him. However, the story took an unexpected turn when a credit card was found in his pocket, issued in Janie Santana's name just 2 years earlier, providing the police with a crucial lead in solving the mystery of his disappearance. Due to Rudolph's 8-year absence, the existence of a relatively new credit card in his mother's name raised important questions. As detectives investigated with Janie's neighbors and family members, they uncovered intriguing information. The local community was stunned to hear on national news about Rudolph's dramatic recovery. They were convinced they had seen him at his mother's house not long before, unaware there was a missing person case related to Janie. The collective surprise was amplified by media stories, especially since the young man they recognized wasn't called Rudolph, but Dolph. Although Rudolph doesn't have a twin, neighbors often describe Dolph as introverted yet approachable. He was frequently seen socializing on the street or joining card games in garages. While gentle and friendly, Dolph always seemed confused and usually walked his mother to her workplace in the evenings. Janie encouraged her son's involvement with the neighbors, suggesting they invite him to dinner or give small gifts to show appreciation for their kindness. Despite Rudolph, which is very similar to Dolph, it puzzled the neighbors how this situation occurred. It was eventually revealed that Dolph and Rudolph were actually the same person, who had been missing for nearly 8 years. However, questions arose. Why were all the news outlets saying that the boy had been found, especially when, according to the neighbors, he never went missing? If his mother knew this, why was she often participating in missing persons forums and posting melancholy updates on social media? Who really is Janie Santana? When Janie Santana met her most recent spouse, she was already a mother to Rudolph, while her future partner had a child from a previous relationship. They were on the path to forming a big blended family. The kids got along right away. Rudolph was thrilled to gain a brother, Charles, who was 8 years older than him. Everything seemed perfect until, a year after the wedding, the husband discovered that Janie was simultaneously married to another man, making this her 5th marriage. After separating from her previous spouse, Janie did not want to complete the divorce process and became hostile toward her partner. She was fined $43,000 for her unlawful actions. Moreover, her siblings sued her for neglecting their elderly mother, Rose, who suffered from dementia and needed constant care. Although the siblings were ready to take care of their mother, Janie convinced Rose that living with her and Rudolph was the best option. Finally, Janie got the right to take care of Rose, but she faces terrible living conditions at Jane's house. Rose lived in an unhygienic environment, forced to sleep on a dirty and wet couch. The house was filled with animal waste because it wasn't cleaned regularly. Rose even had to go to the hospital because of infected bed sores. Jane's siblings tried to talk to Rose, but her mental abilities were impaired. Janie showed no willingness to make changes, leading them to take legal action against Janie for keeping a home that was not clean, safe, or suitable for an elderly person. In court, they claimed she was a compulsive liar who didn't properly care for their mother. However, Janie's attitude toward Rose did not seem loving. Her family believed she was mainly interested in the financial benefits from the state for caregiving Rose. Janie appeared to be a dedicated single mother, but she had unusual habits, especially a strong obsession with social media. She spent her free time focused on her online presence, where she mostly interacted with herself. Janie created several fake profiles to comment on her own posts. She used these accounts to have detailed conversations, asking questions and responding as if she were different people. Her goal was to create the appearance of popularity on her social media, making her profile seem very active. Like many people, Janie enjoyed drama and often turned small matters into big ones. One day, her son Rudolph had a swelling in his leg after visiting the family doctor, who confirmed that the swelling was harmless. However, Janie quickly took him to the emergency room, urging him to say he had taken many pills to try and escape an alleged cancer diagnosis. After his hospitalization, Janie took and shared a photo of Rudolph in his hospital bed, making her audience believe he was battling cancer. Some online users speculated that Janie might be showing signs of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition where caregivers create or induce medical problems in those they care for to gain attention and sympathy by telling false stories of sacrifice and suffering. Despite this, children generally display different characteristics from their parents, and Rudolph was a clear example of this difference. Even though Rudolph's relationship was mainly his mom and her numerous partners, his personality was very different from Janie's. Rudolph was naturally compassionate and kind, always ready to help anyone in need, even if it was just a stray cat. As he grew up, he stood out for being shy, gentle, and introverted. Besides his mother, Rudolph's only true confidant was his beloved stepbrother Charles, who acted as both a father figure and an older brother. Rudolph looked up to Charles and wanted to follow in his footsteps, especially after Charles joined the Marine Corps. This motivated Rudolph to consider a career in the military as well. On a significant day, while Janie and Rudolph were at home, a phone call suddenly altered their lives. After receiving disturbing news, Janie, in a panic, rushed Rudolph outside. That day, Charles had been in a motorcycle accident near their home. The family, along with their mother, arrived at the scene before the paramedics. At only 13 years old, Rudolph faced the traumatic sight of his older brother dying by the roadside in Houston, an experience that deeply impacted him. On the first anniversary of Charles's tragic death, Rudolph, despite being young, used social media to express his grief. He recalled that it had been a year since Charles went to meet the Lord, regretting not having expressed his affection to him. Rudolph wholeheartedly wished his dear brother would come back. 3 years after Charles's passing, Rudolph's biological father also died, though they had barely had any contact. The father, a former police officer, was found dead in his patrol car. He had been dismissed from the force for falsifying reports and issuing excessive speeding tickets for personal gain. Over 3 years, he had illegally earned more than $150,000 through fake overtime. Facing humiliation and impending legal consequences, and unable to cope with the scandal and loss of his career, Rudolph, who essentially grew up without a father, had to accept the harsh truth that he would never have the chance to rebuild a relationship with him. This realization deeply affected his fragile mental state, stirring up feelings of resentment, sorrow, and anger. By the age of 16, Rudolph had already experienced the loss of 2 important people in his life, his stepbrother and his biological father. Despite having a mature understanding of grief, deep down, Rudolph still held on to the innocence of a child. His relatives noticed that emotionally, he was like a 10-year-old, trusting, gentle, sweet, and naively youthful. Time later, Rudolph suddenly disappeared. For the next 8 years, Janie shared the story of how he went missing after a routine dog walk, which usually lasted 15 to 20 minutes. When 2 hours passed without Rudolph returning, Janie felt a surge of motherly panic after hearing barking at the door. She hurried to check and found only one dog, its leash dragging behind it having come back alone. She guessed that Rudolph had gone to look for the other dog, causing his delay. The second dog didn't return until the next morning, but Rudolph was still missing. Janie was very upset when she called the police and accidentally gave the wrong birth date for her son. This caused the officers to think Rudolph was an adult. As a result, they didn't act quickly because they assumed the teenager had simply decided to leave home on his own. The search focused on the usual route Rudolph would take, where they found a backpack with notebooks and an asthma inhaler. Janie confirmed that these items belonged to her son, although there was no sign of criminal activity. The detectives considered the teenager missing, and Janie assumed the role of a worried mother. She quickly made and distributed posters with her son's picture all over the city, rallying the support of the police, family, friends, and the general community in the search effort, who showed empathy and offered their help. Over time, the story of Rudolph's disappearance faded as law enforcement personnel changed and the community moved on with their lives. Janie was the only one who remained dedicated to finding her son. She created a webpage for Rudolph's search, appealing to the public's empathy and raising over $2,000 in donations to support the effort. Over the years, as official investigations made little progress, Santana began using online forums and social media to express her worries. Feeling something was seriously amiss, she expressed her intention to travel to a town on the USA-Mexico border, believing that Rudolph had become a victim of human trafficking. She decided to embark on a personal quest to rescue him. Janie described the trip to her family and friends as dangerous and challenging, and she even started a fundraiser to pay for it. However, those who knew her suspected that Janie might be using Rudolph's situation as an excuse for a short vacation and a way to collect money. They had backed her before in similar ventures, dropping everything to join her in her travels whenever rumors of Rudolph's sightings popped up across the country. After each fruitless search, Janie would lament on social media the pain of being separated from her son, pleading with guardian angels to protect him while she was away. Through her posts, she would speak directly to Rudolph, expressing how much she missed him. Meanwhile, as she crafted these sorrowful tales, Rudolph was actually at home for 8 years. Janie had isolated him, keeping him behind a locked door. Although not physically chained, Rudolph experienced psychological imprisonment, losing his freedom. Rudolph became disheartened by the way he was treated at home, feeling that he were deeply disrespected, leading Rudolph to decide to escape. His attempt to break free took about 24 hours. By the next day, he was back home, a detail only Janie knew. It seemed like the mother had used this incident both as a punishment and as an opportunity to draw attention to herself. After a long walk with the dogs, during which he was gone for several hours, Rudolph wanted to apologize for the worry he had caused. But Janie told him that he was now wanted by the police. She made up a story about him getting a speeding ticket days before, and with his disappearance already reported, she hinted that the authorities believed he was avoiding legal consequences. Now labeled as a criminal, Rudolph, with no legal knowledge and trusting mother. Thus, he spent the first day locked in his room, which turned into a week, then a year, under his mother's manipulative influence. Every time visitors came, Rudolph would retreat to his room and remain completely silent, a prisoner in his own home. Rosa, Rudolph's grandmother, knew he was present and tried several times to tell her children. However, Rudolph's aunts and uncles ignored her, thinking she was just confused due to senile dementia. After the case was settled, Janie let her son go out occasionally to visit the neighbors, but now she called him Dolph. The missing person posters showed his photo at 14, so it's no wonder many didn't recognize him. His mother thought a childhood photo would evoke more sympathy from people. Sometimes, she'd give him her credit card and send him to the store to buy groceries or other things to keep him from realizing she was using him. Janie secretly added illegal substances and sedatives to his meals, which made him feel slow and unable to think clearly. She kept threatening him with jail and the police, so he reluctantly remained at home. There were many rumors about Janie's inappropriate behavior with her adult son. She would enter his bathroom without knocking and make Rudolph lie with her under the blanket without clothes. However, Rudolph suggested there were some intimate moments between them. He felt that his mother still treated him like a child and just acted as though he were her husband. The family also saw Rudolph in town more than once and reported it to the police. Uniformed officers would come to Janie's house and even look inside, but without a warrant, they couldn't enter. During this time, Janie acted calmly, not raising any suspicions among the officers. The cops would leave, saying the tip was false. No law enforcement officer, no family member, nobody could have imagined that Rudolph had been quietly living under his own roof, rarely going out. After enduring 8 years of being stuck at home, Rudolph came up with a plan. In the middle of the night, he grabbed his mom's car keys and credit card and sneaked out without a clear destination. Even though he hadn't driven in 8 years, he only managed to be behind the wheel for a few minutes before crashing the car, ending up with numerous cuts and bruises. He left the keys in the car and continued on foot until he reached a church. Exhausted, he collapsed. Janie posted a photo of Rudolph in a hospital bed on social media to gain sympathy. This picture was taken 8 years ago when he was hospitalized for a leg tumor. The authorities quickly tried to move Rudolph to a hospital, but his mother convinced them that his condition would worsen there, so she decided to take him home instead. In truth, she was worried that Rudolph would reveal the truth when he woke up. On July 5, 2023, Rudolph gathered enough courage to speak up and confided only in a local activist named Quell, known for advocating for the rights of discrimination victims. Quell helped people share their cases through media coverage and negotiations with law enforcement. Despite Janie's constant interruptions during the conversation, Rudolph managed to express his side of the story. Eventually, it became clear that Janie's presence was hindering the dialogue, and she was asked to leave the room. Rudolph showed signs of self-harm, reflecting the impact of his confinement. Despite feeling uneasy sharing a bed with his mother, he stressed his lasting love for her. Quell publicly expressed that a mother who did such things should face consequences for her actions and was surprised that Janie was not yet arrested. Quell was deeply moved by Rudolph's story. However, that very night, Rudolph went back home with his mother. Janie, trying to manipulate him emotionally, threatened to harm herself unless Rudolph withdrew his statement to the police, not knowing their conversation was being recorded. Meanwhile, Janie stuck to her false story. At a press conference, the police announced that they would not press charges against Janie for now, due to insufficient evidence of her wrongdoing. Rudolph is currently staying with a family friend, but it is unclear how far his mother might go to regain custody of him and attract more attention on social media. The International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which operates worldwide, reports that hundreds of thousands of missing children are reported every year, and that parents are often involved in these disappearances. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Diamond Bradley. Diamond Bradley was born on March 21, 2001, in Clarksville, Tennessee. She has an older brother named Quan, who was 3 years her senior. After her parents, Doris and Philip, separated, forcing Doris to find a quieter and safer environment for her children, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. She moved her children, including Diamond's sibling Quan, to Spring Valley, Illinois, a small town where relatives are also there. This allowed Diamond and Quan to grow up with their cousins. Spring Valley is a small town located along the Illinois River with a population that was around 5,000 in 2002. Unlike larger towns, Spring Valley has no big shopping malls or tall buildings, but everyone there is very close-knit, relying on each other's support. Doris worked as a cook at a local nursing home for over 15 years, allowing her to provide for her children as they grew up. As Doris's busy schedule sometimes kept her away, her son Quan took on a significant role in caring for his younger sister, Diamond. He took on the roles of a guardian, mentor, and protective older brother, establishing a deep and enduring bond with her. Diamond also spent a lot of time with her cousin Giovanna, who looked so much like her that many people thought they were twins. Doris later had 2 more children, a girl named Malia and a boy named Quentin. Spring Valley was an ideal place to raise a family, but it had limited activities for teenagers. As a young girl at the time, Diamond enjoyed singing, dancing, playing with her siblings, and taking photos. But as social media and smartphones became increasingly popular, Diamond began spending more time online. She gradually began seeking out online friends and connections for social interaction and entertainment purposes. By the time she was 13 years old in 2014, Diamond started actively posting a variety of content on her social media page. Diamond shared her personal life on social media, including her relationships and social engagements. She was especially close to her family, particularly her mother, and often expressed her love and affection for them online. As she entered adulthood, she used social media to seek advice or simply express her thoughts and feelings. She was not immune to the typical struggles of adolescence, sometimes finding it necessary to confide in others or experiencing overwhelming distrust. Although Diamond's family members, including Doris, interacted with her social media posts, she longed for attention and engagement from her peers. Since she had few friends in Spring Valley, her interest in boys started to grow, and she used social media as a digital diary to express her thoughts and feelings. She frequently posted updates, sometimes multiple times a day, allowing others to follow her life and thoughts. During this time, Diamond was very close to her family, but sometimes she felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness and disconnection. To fill this void, she turned to social media, where she openly shared her struggles with forming friendships and expressed her deep longing for affection and attention. Through her posts, her longing for affection and attention. Through her posts, Diamond openly expressed her honest thoughts and feelings to anyone who would listen. Diamond was a high school student who had recently started dating Nicholas Nelson, and the two seemed like a perfect match. They spent a lot of time together and genuinely seemed to be in love. Despite her youth, Diamond had big ambitions. She wanted to pursue a career in nursing. The Diamond household was filled with love and laughter on January 23, 2018, as friends and family gathered to celebrate Doris's birthday. The evening was filled with warmth and joy, complete with a festive cake, music, and the company of dear loved ones. Doris completely did not foresee that her life was about to change suddenly and tragically. As the party came to a close, guests began to leave around 10 p.m. Doris told her daughter, Diamond, good night, and Diamond went to take a shower. The next morning, Doris got up, just before 7 a.m., to prepare breakfast and get the younger kids ready for school. However, when she went to wake up Diamond, she was nowhere to be found. Her bedroom upstairs was vacant as well. Initially, Doris was not worried, because she understood her daughter's hobby of running to the nearby gas station to buy coffee in the morning. However, as time passed and Diamond still hadn't returned, her worries increased. Diamond does not have his own car, and the weather outside is wet with snow and wind, so won't be able to go for a walk. When Doris tried to call Diamond, her calls went straight to voicemail, which was unusual. By 8:30 a.m., DeCoin, Diamond's father, arrived at her house as they had previously arranged. What made him worried was Diamond's unusual silence, who typically made an effort to stay in touch with her family to avoid worrying them. Doris's concern for her daughter, Diamond, grew by the hour. Despite contacting all of Diamond's acquaintances, no one had any information about her whereabouts. DeCoin searched the town but found no sign of her. As the hours passed, Doris experienced a mix of emotions, from fear to anger, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened to her daughter. This was the longest Diamond had ever gone without contacting her, and Doris's anxiety became unbearable. When her family searched on their own without results, Doris reported her daughter missing to the police at 6 p.m. Police began an investigation immediately. They contacted Diamond's cell phone provider to try to determine the last location of her phone by tracking cell tower signals. A prompt check on the device's activity revealed phone that it was last active at 7:18 a.m. near Tonopah, Illinois, approximately 5 miles northwest of a cell tower. However, this information only narrowed the search area and did not provide a specific location. Following this discovery, the phone stopped working due to a dead battery or deliberate shutdown, as there was no further activity. Diamond's mother anxiously, she to the hope that her niece, Giovanna, who had been in contact with Diamond the previous evening, might be able to provide crucial information. Diamond often shared her thoughts and plans with Giovanna. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, Giovanna revealed a secret to Doris. Diamond had a second phone that she used to access the internet via Wi-Fi, which was unknown to her family. Diamond's brother, Quan, discovered a cell phone in a dresser drawer that was protected by a password and without a cellular plan. This thing surprised Doris. She had no knowledge of her daughter owning a secret phone. Concerned, Doris immediately took the phone to the police, hoping to find clues that would help locate her missing daughter. Upon examination, investigators suspected that the phone was used for activities of which Doris would not have approved. After breaking the lock screen, they encountered additional security requests, requiring individual passwords for each app. However, notifications visible on the lock screen revealed several people inviting Diamond to meet up. The investigation found that Diamond had been using the phone to interact with people on dating platforms, which shocked Doris, but was not a surprise to Giovanna. However, Doris was upset by the discovery because she had always been concerned about her daughter's dating, especially her attraction to older men and the potential dangers of online interactions. As a result, Doris has repeatedly warned Diamond to be cautious when communicating with strangers online, especially since she knew her daughter had a tendency to lie about her age. Diamond's mother and Quan had cautioned her about the risks of growing up too quickly, but she created an online profile that made her appear older anyway. As the search for Diamond continued, law enforcement agencies looked beyond the internet for clues. They spoke with people in the neighborhood, checked nearby stores, and collected surveillance footage to try to find any clues. At Diamond's usual coffee shop, the police found one camera with low-quality video that showed a dark-colored vehicle and its male driver, who appeared to be an adult. With very little evidence to work with, the police focused on this man and carefully examined the video to see if they could find any details that might reveal Diamond's location. To aid in the search for his missing younger sister, Diamond's brother, Quan, traversed nearby towns, posting flyers with her photo and a detailed description. His theory was that she had been abducted and taken outside of their town. He felt that time was limited, and swift action was necessary. He couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for oversleeping that morning and not returning home sooner, as he believed he might have prevented Diamond's disappearance had he done so. On January 25th, Jasmine, another of Diamond's cousins, visited the police station to share crucial information that could aid in locating Diamond. Jasmine discovered a disturbing truth about Diamond's online activity. It was putting her in greater danger. Diamond had been exploring dating websites and noticed ads for paid meetups with men, which piqued her interest. She learned that some men would pay women to meet up with them. What Jasmine found out was that, unknown to everyone, Diamond had been experimenting with this idea. In fact, Diamond had even posted her own ads on adult websites, which explained why her phone's lock screen was filled with notifications. Doris's daughter, Diamond, had been receiving numerous messages from unfamiliar men, who responded to her online profiles and advertisements. The majority of these messages were from older men. Doris was shocked and felt guilty as a mother. She could never have imagined that her underage daughter will use this way to make money. Quan's perspective, however, differed from Doris's. He believed that his mother always balanced between being strict and giving her children independence. Diamond may not have understood the severity of her actions. She may have thought that she would be paid for spending time on dates, especially with older men who she thought would be more generous. She was exploring life with the curiosity and inexperience of youth, unaware of the hidden dangers on those digital platforms. The temptation of easy money for social activities online can be particularly enticing for young girls. The police knew that many young people in Spring Valley felt trapped in a dull routine, spending most of their free time on the internet, a world that their parents didn't fully understand. As a result, many parents were unaware of the online risks their children faced every day. The local police asked the FBI for help in analyzing data from Diamond's main phone to track her movements on the day she disappeared. With the FBI's advanced resources, they were able to map out Diamond's route, indicating she was likely in a moving vehicle due to the speed of her movement. Investigators then reviewed nearby surveillance footage and found 13 vehicles that matched the time and location, but unfortunately, the poor image quality made it impossible to read the license plate numbers. As detectives examined Diamond's digital communications, they focused on her interactions on dating apps and social media platforms. A key clue was a message Diamond sent on the morning of her disappearance to a 26-year-old man known as Jay. He confirmed that he had a romantic connection with Diamond, but stated that he ended contact after learning her true age on the morning of January 24th at 6 a.m. Earlier that morning, Diamond had invited Jay to meet at an IHOP restaurant, but she quickly rescinded the invitation, apologizing and claiming she meant to send the message to someone else. Jay responded with a harmless smiley face at 6:40 a.m. Not long after, Diamond sent a disturbing message saying, "She dying." Doris was consumed by anger and desperation after learning Jay was the last person to see her 16-year-old daughter, Diamond. In her distress, she quickly accused Jay of harming her child. However, Jay had an alibi. He claimed to have spent the entire night at home playing video games with a friend. Although Jay was initially hesitant to reveal the friend's identity, he eventually disclosed that it was Giovanna, Diamond's cousin. This information complicates the investigation, and it also does not help investigators find Diamond. Investigators refocused on the black Jeep, finding more surveillance footage, showing it heading to Putnam County, where Diamond's phone signal disappeared, either because the phone was turned off or the battery ran out. The vehicle became central to the investigation, as authorities believed it could reveal what happened to Diamond. However, the situation took a dire turn on January 27th, 3 days after Diamond was reported missing, when the Putnam County Sheriff's Office received a concerning call before noon. A pedestrian walking down Pebble Path in Granville Township found the body of a young African-American woman in a ditch beside the road. When the head of Putnam County authorities arrived, they realized the woman's death was no accident. She had been intentionally killed. Her body showed multiple wounds on her back, stomach, legs, arms, and hands. The discovery prompted the police chief to recall a recent missing person report from Spring Valley that matched the woman's description, leading him to make an urgent call. The area where Diamond's body was found was a rural landscape covered in snow, with cornfields on either side of a narrow path. The nearest house was several miles away. Unfortunately, part of her body was submerged in water from a brook flowing through a ditch. A close examination of her remains revealed defensive injuries, indicating that she fought back fiercely until the very end. Following this heartbreaking discovery, the lead detective had the difficult task of informing Diamond's family about her tragic death. At 7 p.m., police arrived at the doorstep, and Doris immediately had a foreboding feeling, a sense of impending sorrow. Even before the police spoke, indication of a mother's intuition sensing something was terribly wrong. Kwan came home to an atmosphere of unimaginable grief, faced the harsh reality that Diamond is gone forever. The devastating news that she had been found deceased was too much for him to bear, causing him to faint. When the news spread through the small community, everyone was deeply shaken. Many were worried about letting their children play outside, fearing the suspect might be nearby. To aid in their search, investigators closely examined the security footage of a black Jeep, focusing on key details. The police sought the expertise of a specialized automotive shop, and a technician carefully reviewed the footage. The technician was able to identify the Jeep as a specific model year of the Jeep Wrangler. With this new information, the police searched their databases for Jeep owners in the area who matched the suspect description. After contacting several owners of similar Jeeps, the officers visited a house a few kilometers north of where Diamond's remains were found. When they arrived, a woman answered the door and told them the owner of the black Jeep had moved to a different town called Sandra, but unfortunately, she didn't have their new address. Sandra, a small community with a population of about 200 people located just 2 miles away, made the search for the suspect less overwhelming. While patrolling the area, the police found a black Jeep Wrangler parked in the driveway of a house. The vehicle belonged to 26-year-old Richard Henderson. On January 24th, Richard had driven to Spring Valley and stopped at a gas station across from the Bradley residence, matching the individual seen in the gas station's surveillance footage. According to the video, he waited at the gas station for a call from a friend, but left before the call came through. The detectives carefully studied Richard's behavior, paying close attention to the pauses in his story and the expressions on his face. In particular, they noticed that he hesitated when they asked him the name of his friend. He revealed that her first name was Diamond, but admitted that he didn't know her last name. As the detectives continued to question him, they skillfully guided the conversation to extract more information. Eventually, Richard confessed to meeting Diamond that day, although their original plans were cancelled. However, his alibi raised suspicions. He claimed to have left Diamond at a mobile home, which seemed inconsistent with the direction her phone had been moved. The investigators became suspicious. They decided driving along the route Richard and Diamond had taken that day to gather more information. Starting from the gas station, they drove past the intersection that had been caught on video, over a bridge, and into the rural area of Bantam County. The drive ended where Diamond's phone signal stopped working. What remains of the little girl are stuffed toys and artificial flowers at her memorial next to the streambed. When questioned by the detective about the site, Richard became overcome with emotion, tears streaming down his face. The detective took advantage of this vulnerable moment to press Richard for more information about what had happened. Richard described the incidents that occurred as follows. He and Diamond had gone to a secluded area for a private encounter. Afterward, he asked her to leave his car, but she refused and pulled out a knife. A fight broke out, and Richard claimed he was acting in self-defense. He stated that in an attempt to block her knife, the blade accidentally stabbed her in the abdomen. According to Richard, then she continued to be aggressive, so he disarmed her and hit her twice in what he described as further self-defense. Ultimately, he left her in a nearby ditch. The autopsy results contradicted Richard's story, revealing that Diamond had received over 20 stab wounds, with some of them found on her back. Given the substantial physical disparity between Richard and Diamond, Richard's explanation became extremely improbable. As a fully grown adult, nearly 6 feet tall and weighing twice as much as Diamond, who was just under 5 feet tall, he was attacking a young child. Tragically, Diamond had already lost her life by the time the search for her began. At the funeral, over 200 people came together, including family, friends, classmates, and teachers from Spring Valley High School. Because Doris chose cremation for Diamond, she was able to keep her daughter's remains with her at all times. The thought of leaving Diamond in a graveyard was too difficult for Doris to bear. As a result, she took Diamond's urn with her everywhere she went, even to court during Richard's sentencing. Richard Henderson pleaded guilty to avoid a life sentence and was given a 53-year prison term without the possibility of parole. Doris considered ending her life because of the overwhelming sadness of being separated from her daughter, but thinking about her remaining child, Quan, gave her the strength to continue living. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Judy Blake Moylanen. Judy Diane Blake was born on October 16, 1957, into a conservative family in Hancock, Michigan. As the only daughter of Dale and Mary Ann Blake, she was cherished by her parents and her two brothers, Jerry and David. In addition to being active members of the Redeemer Free Lutheran Church, her parents owned a business named Dale Service, which allowed them to give their children a loving and comfortable life. Judy grew up to be a beautiful young woman who dreamed of having her own family. In 1974, she met the love of her life, Bruce Mollanen. Both worked in healthcare. Judy was a nurse, and Bruce was support staff. Bruce was 3 years older and had a very different personality. While Judy was shy and sweet, Bruce was outgoing and confident. Judy came from a tight-knit and religious family, whereas Bruce did not have a close relationship with his own. Despite their differences, they get along very well. Judy admired Bruce's confidence, and Bruce saw Judy as the ideal partner to build a life with. However, Judy's family had their doubts about Bruce, even though she was fully supportive of him. Judy and Bruce married in 1978. Over the years, Judy's family made significant efforts to include Bruce as part of their family, and it appeared that he bonded well with them. The family celebrated the arrival of Judy and Bruce's only daughter, Elise, in 1989. For several years, they enjoyed a happy life together, unaware that everything was about to change dramatically. On November 29, 1992, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, Judy and Bruce were visiting the Blakes with their young daughter, Elise. It was also the final day of the hunting season in the Upper Peninsula. That morning, Bruce went with Judy's brothers to hunt for deer in the nearby woods, while Judy stayed at the house with her mother and daughter. In the afternoon, Judy took her parents' dog, Streak, for a walk in the woods behind the Blakes' property on Highway 38 in Ontonagon County, Michigan. As Mary Ann said goodbye, she didn't know it would be the last time she would see her daughter. After 2.5 hours without any word from Judy, Mary Ann started to worry about her safety. Even though Judy knew the woods well, there was a chance she could have had an accident or run into trouble, especially since it was still hunting season. Concerned, Mary Ann took a neighbor with her and went into the woods to search for her daughter. They were trying to follow Judy's footsteps on the walking path, but it was getting darker and harder to see. After nearly an hour, Mary Ann stumbled upon a harrowing sight that no mother should ever see. About 500 to 600 feet into the woods, Mary Ann and the neighbor found Judy lying still on her side. Her dogs were nearby, wandering alone. When they turned Judy onto her back, they discovered a bloody chest wound, and it was clear that she was already deceased. Screaming at the top of her lungs, Mary Ann rushed back to her house to inform the local authorities about what had happened. Investigators quickly determined that Judy had died from a gunshot wound. As the night grew colder, police officers searched the woods for evidence, relying only on their flashlights. Despite thoroughly searching the area, detectives found very few clues. They couldn't locate the bullet that killed Judy, but they did discover an important piece of evidence. It was a scorch mark on a maple tree. Bob Ball, the lead detective on the case, concluded that the blaze mark could have been made by the same bullet that killed Judy. He believed that if he could locate the bullet, he could trace it back to the shooter, which would provide insights into how Judy was shot. Forensic tests on the scrapings later confirmed that the mark was caused by a bullet impact. By analyzing the position of the body and the blaze mark, investigators determined that the bullet struck Judy first, passed through her heart, exited her body through the left side, hit a tree, and then landed somewhere in the woods. At the time, the incident was viewed as a tragic accident. Investigators thought that Judy was accidentally shot by a stray bullet from an unknown hunter, which was not uncommon in that part of the Upper Peninsula. In fact, there had been a few similar hunting incidents in the area before this one. Unfortunately, it was challenging to find the person responsible for Judy's death because bullets from high-powered hunting rifles can travel over 3 miles. Often, hunters are unaware that their bullets have harmed someone. Detective Bob aimed to remain open-minded as Judy's body was transported to the medical examiner's office. Meanwhile, the detectives began interviewing family members. Although everyone appeared deeply distressed by the tragedy, one comment from Bruce raised Detective Bob's concerns. Bruce criticized his late wife for not being more cautious and for not wearing orange while in the woods. This drew suspicion towards him, as it is common for investigators to focus on those closest to the victim in cases of violent crime. However, Detective Bob also believes that Bruce is just a grieving husband trying to hide his sadness. Additionally, Judy's family maintained that Bruce was with them all day and were convinced he had no involvement in their daughter's death. They expressed frustration towards the police for considering him a suspect. This marked the beginning of a complicated investigation. 2 days later, the autopsy report provided important information. The estimated time of death was around 3 p.m. When Detective Bob returned to question the Blake family with this new detail, they admitted that while Bruce spent most of the day with them, they did not keep an eye on him during that specific time. Despite this, they remained unfazed and strongly believed in his innocence, openly defending him. They were unhappy with the investigation because they believed the police had wrongly targeted a man who was still grieving his wife's death. At that time, Judy's family was unaware that detectives had additional reasons to suspect her death was not accidental. Forensic evidence revealed that the bullet entered her body at a lower point than it exited, indicating it passed through at an upward angle. This detail was crucial. If a hunter had fired the shot, the bullet would have entered at a downward angle, suggesting it came from a greater distance. It now seemed almost certain that Judy had been intentionally killed. Was Bruce truly involved, or was he merely a target of the detectives' narrow focus? Due to this new evidence and doubts about his alibi, the detectives decided to investigate Bruce Moylanen more closely. On December 11, 1992, just 12 days after the investigation began, Bruce was called to the sheriff's office for formal questioning. Within minutes, during his conversation with Bob Ball, Bruce provided a detailed account of where he was on the day his wife died, naming nearly 30 different people who could corroborate his story. Despite his detailed account of the day's events, there was a missing 30-minute gap that he could not explain. Detective Bob grew suspicious of him, especially since he consistently denied any involvement in his wife's death. During the interview, Bob questioned whether Bruce was actually interested in hunting deer that afternoon or if he had other intentions. While the matter of Bruce's innocence remained unresolved, his actions suggested otherwise. He hardly seemed to mourn. Just weeks after Judy's death, he was going on ski trips, socializing with friends, and flirting with some of Judy's acquaintances instead of focusing on his wife. By this point, even Judy's family had started to doubt him, despite their earlier support. His behavior was the reason for their suspicions. Detectives were actively investigating the case but had not found any concrete evidence against him. To gather more information, Detective Bob asked some of Bruce's friends and co-workers to discreetly monitor him and inform the police if they noticed anything unusual. This led to a shocking discovery. Detective Bob made a call to 35-year-old Gail Lampinen, who worked with Bruce. She had a story about him. After the funeral, Bruce unexpectedly showed up at her house with 5 boxes containing his deceased wife's belongings. He placed the boxes on Gail's porch and walked away before she could ask him anything. Because it was the holiday season, Gail left the boxes outside for some time without looking inside. When she finally opened the boxes, Gail discovered that they were filled mostly with Judy's clothes. However, beneath the clothing in one of the boxes, she found a letter dated 6 months earlier and signed by Judy. This discovery was surprising for Gail, as she had only met Judy once. What made it even more unusual was the content of the letter. It began with Judy expressing her wish for Gail to have her old clothes as keepsake gifts, as she believed Gail was the only person Bruce truly trusted. The letter further revealed intimate details about Bruce and Judy's marriage, indicating that they no longer saw eye to eye and were close to separating. It also mentioned that Bruce needed a new girlfriend. The most unusual aspect of the letter was that the writer complimented Bruce's abilities in bed. This raised a red flag for Gail, who immediately sensed something was off, and the detectives shared her suspicion. To verify the letter's authenticity, they approached forensic document examiner James Stiegel. His job was to compare the letter to Judy's known handwriting samples to see if she had written it. Handwriting analysis revealed that the letter's writing was slow and deliberate, which could indicate it was forged. Ultimately, Judy was not the author of the letter, but the handwriting did not definitively link it to Bruce. Detectives struggled to find solid evidence against Bruce and had to make do with their limited resources. To gather more information, Detective Bob decided to speak with Gail again. During their interviews, Gail told the investigators that Bruce had been trying to get her attention for a long time, even before Judy's death. However, Gail, who was married, found Bruce to be annoying and persistent. Despite his advances, she chose to ignore him, hoping he would eventually lose interest and leave her alone. Gail wasn't the only one who had a negative opinion of Bruce. In fact, no one had anything positive to say about him. He often flirted with female colleagues, which led most people to avoid him. His co-workers frequently expressed their frustration, stating that he was hard to work with. Additionally, Gail mentioned that after his wife's death, Bruce boasted about the fortune he would inherit. To Gail, this seemed like a desperate attempt to win her over romantically. This information prompted Detective Bob to investigate further into Moylanen's marriage. The detectives anticipated that Judy and Bruce would have frequent arguments due to his flirtations at work. However, they found no evidence that Judy was aware of Bruce's inappropriate actions towards his female colleagues. They also discovered that the Moylanen family faced financial difficulties in the months leading up to Judy's death, primarily due to Bruce's reckless spending and irresponsibility. Bruce had accumulated significant debt, and his situation worsened to the point where he had to borrow money from one lender to pay another. Throughout their marriage, Judy had managed the financial strain with her income, but she was starting to feel overwhelmed by Bruce's behavior, especially with the added responsibility of caring for their daughter. Detectives found that weeks before Judy's death, Bruce started accumulating insurance policies under her name. Many of these policies included a double indemnity clause, which meant they would pay out double if Judy died accidentally. Detective Bob questioned whether Bruce viewed this as a way to solve both his financial issues and eliminate his wife. Following Judy's death, Bruce was close to receiving a financial payout of $330,000 from her life insurance policies. Investigators uncovered a disturbing fact. In 1991, nearly 14 months before Judy's death, she suffered a serious accident. An 85-pound chimney block fell from a roof where Bruce was working and struck Judy on the head, nearly killing her. Fortunately, she survived but sustained a severe concussion and spent several days in the hospital. Shortly after this incident, a fire broke out in the Moylanen house while Judy was sleeping alone inside. Thankfully, she woke up in time and was able to call the fire department. Judy felt frightened after the two incidents. Many of her friends informed the detectives that Judy had shared her desire to leave her husband, mentioning a feeling that something bad was happening around her. Despite this, she decides to continue the marriage for the sake of their daughter and keeping her feelings hidden from her family. At this point, Detective Bob was nearly convinced that Bruce Moylanen had murdered his wife and staged it as a hunting accident. Unfortunately, they lacked the physical evidence needed to prove it. Desperate for answers, Detective Bob contacted Dan Castle, an expert in metal detectors who had previously assisted law enforcement. Aware that the fatal bullet was still hidden in the woods, Bob requested Dan's help in locating it. Dan diligently used his metal detector every day, but this time he faced a significant challenge and found nothing. After weeks of searching, the snow had completely obscured any signs of the bullet. Despite this setback, Dan remained determined to continue the search. Dan conducted an experiment using a slingshot to replicate the bullet's trajectory and pinpoint its possible landing spot. Fortunately, his method was successful. After searching the area where his marbles bounced off the snow, he discovered the bullet about 80 feet from the maple tree. Although this find was significant, authorities still needed to verify whether it was the bullet that killed Judy or just another one from hunting season. Ray Kenny, a firearm examiner at the Marquette State Police Crime Lab, was assigned to analyze a bullet he had discovered. Within a few days, he identified it as a .30 caliber round that matched wood fibers from the tree it struck. Ray confirmed it was indeed the bullet that hit the tree, but he also uncovered more significant evidence. He found a small pink fiber from the shirt Judy was wearing and some black fibers from her jacket. This provided a crucial connection in the case, marking a significant breakthrough. The investigators next focused on Bruce's notable gun collection. They tested all the rifles that might have fired the fatal bullet and identified 4 potential firearms. At this point, Bruce had no choice but to tell the truth, yet he still chose to lie. He denied owning any of those rifles, but his luck quickly ran out. Judy and Bruce's financial records revealed loan documents listing his gun collection as collateral. Additionally, detectives found an asset list that included a rifle Bruce had failed to disclose. This rifle, which had a scope, matched one of the 4 potential firearms that could have fired the bullet. Investigators eventually concluded that the firearm was likely the murder weapon. They recognized that uncovering the truth was critical at this stage. On April 23, 1993, 5 months into the investigation, Bruce finally agreed to take a polygraph test after previously avoiding it for months. During the initial part of the test, Bruce was calm while answering the investigators' questions. In an effort to elicit the truth, detectives placed a letter from Gail on the table in front of him. This moment marked a turning point in the interview, as Bruce began to share a different story. For the first time, Bruce realized that Gail was secretly working with the police, or he feared that the authorities had finally caught up with him. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears and confessed to murdering his wife. After months of denial, he admitted that on November 29, 1992, he had seen a perfect opportunity to kill her. He explained that during the first 2 times he spotted Judy through the trees, he aimed his gun but couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. However, on the 3rd occasion, he closed his eyes and fired, resulting in her death. Bruce explained his motive for the murder by saying that Judy had threatened to divorce him and he wanted to avoid the breakup. To rationalize his actions, he described Judy as a harsh person both at work and at home, and he criticized her cooking. Regarding the murder weapon, Bruce stated that he threw the rifle into a nearby river, but the police were unable to find it during their search. He also pointed out an error in the medical examiner's report, which claimed Judy was shot on the left side of her chest. Bruce insisted that she was shot on the right side, with the bullet exiting on the left. This detail was significant in his confession, as it was information that only the killer would know. Bruce Moylanen was quickly arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Despite confessing to the crime, he pleaded not guilty, arguing that the police forced him to confess. Although prosecutors already had substantial evidence against Bruce, they chose to collect more in anticipation of the trial. Investigators examined the chimney block incident. Bruce had initially stated that he accidentally knocked it off with his foot, but they found it was too heavy to fall without being intentionally pushed. The trial primarily favored the prosecution, supported by numerous witnesses and evidence. Bruce remained mostly silent but began to cry when Gail testified. In contrast, the defense had no witnesses to present. Bruce's lawyer, Thomas Castleman, argued that his potential witnesses were too afraid to come forward. He described the investigation as coercive and claimed that the police had extracted Bruce's confession by force. Ultimately, the jury did not believe Bruce's explanation, and on December 15, 1993, they found him guilty. On January 21, 1994, Bruce Moylanen was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. This decision brought comfort to Judy's family, who had previously questioned his guilt. Judy's brother and sister-in-law, David and Yvonne Blake, took in 5-year-old Elise. This marks the tragic end of a man motivated by greed who believed he could commit the perfect murder. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Linda Sladen. Linda Sladen was born on March 8, 1950. By the time she was 16, she was pregnant with her first son, Jeff Sladen. 3 years later, she gave birth to a second son, Tim Sladen. Soon after, she managed to convince the father of her 2 sons, Frank Sladen, to get married so they could start a proper family. However, a happy family was far from what she thought. Frank turned out to be an abusive husband who would routinely abuse her and the 2 kids. Plagued by his alcoholism and addiction, he would turn violent whenever he got drunk. Jeff and Tim recall that their father would often turn into a monster. He was a violent alcoholic and would beat the 3 of them without any conscience. The thought of filing for divorce soon ran through Linda's mind, and in 1974, Linda Sladen finally became free. She divorced Frank Sladen after 9 volatile years of their marriage. Linda started her new life as a single mom with 2 teenage sons. She tried her best to provide for her family and be there for her sons as a caring mother, juggling work and chores. It was obvious that she had limited financial capabilities. They didn't have a car, so her sons would often go to school either by walking or by sharing rides if they were offered one. Apart from school, Jeff and Tim loved playing football, but since they didn't have a ride to football practice, their coach, Coach Joseph, would often pick them up and drop them off at or nearby their home. A week before the 4th of September, Linda was preparing her home to welcome her mother. She wanted her mother to move in since she thought her presence in the house would help get it in order and make it more homely. Her sister Judy would also often come by to visit her. During her visits, the sisters would spend their time together over a hot cup of coffee. On the 3rd of September, 1981, Jeff Sladen came home from football practice, but when he found nothing to eat at home, he headed over to his grandparents' place. Later, at about 9:30 p.m., Jeff returned home only to find the house empty. Around 11:30 p.m., Linda and Tim, her younger son, came home. She mentioned going to a neighbor's place to play a game of cards, but before that Jeff saw his mom doing the dishes. Tim, on the other hand, went to sleep. Around this time, her son Jeff came up to her and apologized since the 2 had fought earlier that day. As they made up, Linda said goodnight to her boys. Jeff remembers saying these words, "I love you, Mom. I'll see you tomorrow." Little did he know those would be the last words he would say to her. On September 4, 1981, around 8:30 a.m., Judy arrived at Linda's apartment. She went up to Linda's room and knocked on the door twice. There was no answer. She thought Linda might still be in bed, but it was unusual as Linda usually woke up before the boys left for school. As she made her way out of the house, she noticed something strange. The window in Linda's room had a missing something, and on top of that, the window was wide open. Judy returned to Linda's room, knocked again, and this time opened the door to find Linda's lifeless body. She screamed, which caught the attention of a neighbor near the house, and he immediately called 911. Linda was found dead with a wire clothes hanger around her neck. Her body was partially naked, and she lay right across the bed with her head down on the floor. There were no signs of struggle. Her cupboard was wide open, and apart from that, all the other things in the room were in their usual places. Within a matter of minutes, the Lakeland police, news reporters, and medical services all arrived. The yellow sign was plastered all over Linda's home. Tim and Jeff were both awakened by police officers and were asked to leave their home, which was now a crime scene. While Jeff was able to get past his mother's room without seeing her lifeless body, Tim saw his mother one last time, but this time she wasn't alive. The two were then sent to live with their grandparents pending further investigation. After her sons were sent to stay with their grandparents, Sergeant Edgar Pickett from the Lakeland Police Department arrived at the crime scene. He led the investigation and discovered important evidence. Initially, Sergeant Edgar found several fingerprints in Linda's bedroom. While most of the prints matched Linda, one palm print was different. This palm print was located on the windowsill of Linda's bedroom, which was missing a window sheet. To uncover the truth about Linda's death, an autopsy was performed. The examination revealed multiple bruises and marks on her arms, shoulders, and neck. Additionally, her body was found partially naked, suggesting a possible sexual assault. The autopsy concluded that she had first been brutally beaten, then sexually assaulted, and ultimately strangled with a metal clothes hanger from her own home. Among the evidence collected, a palm print was the most important, as it could directly identify the perpetrator if matched. However, at the time, forensic DNA analysis was not available. As a result, the police had to thoroughly investigate her entire family tree to identify potential suspects. The first suspect was Frank Sladen, Linda's ex-husband. When Linda divorced Frank in 1975, she described him as aggressive and abusive, neglecting his family. This made him a key person of interest in the case. He was questioned by police, but they discovered that he was at home in Alabama on the night Linda was killed. Despite this alibi, they continued to have suspicions about him. The second suspect was Linda's son, Jeff. Authorities considered him a suspect because he had a heated argument with his mother shortly before her death. Jeff had a complex relationship with Linda. As the eldest son, he felt the weight of growing up in a household with an abusive father and later with a single mother. Although they sometimes clashed, Jeff always tried to reconcile. On the night of the murder, he and Linda had made up before he went to bed. The police interrogated him about the incident and asked him to take 2 polygraph tests. After he passed both tests, the police cleared him as a suspect. The third suspect was Linda's boyfriend at the time of her murder. Linda, a single mother, had recently started dating a white male whose name has not been disclosed. He had a good relationship with Linda and her children. However, after the police conducted a background check and polygraph tests, he was cleared as a suspect. By this point, the investigation was running low on leads. In September 2001, nearly a year after Linda's murder, they received a tip about a 24-year-old man named Jimmy Omer, who was rumored to have committed a similar crime. At that time, he was connected to an incident in which he pulled a 10-year-old girl through her bedroom window and nearly killed her. The similarities between his crimes and Linda's case led the police to consider him the main suspect. Unfortunately, Jimmy died before the investigation could take place, which meant they couldn't get a DNA match without exhuming his body. Fortunately, his mother agreed to a DNA test and provided a sample. However, the results showed no match. If not for Jimmy's family or the convict next door, who could have killed Linda? As time passed, days turned into weeks and then months. In Lakeland, detectives explored other suspects, but no one was charged, and the lack of new leads caused the case to go cold. The Slayton brothers faced a difficult new reality. Their mother was gone, leaving only their grandparents, Clarence and Margaret Harris, to care for them. While the investigation proceeded, Linda's parents and sons held her funeral, after which they gradually began to resume their normal lives. The brothers returned to school, and as time went on, they started to heal from the events at 303 North Brunel Parkway. Tim resumed playing football and fondly remembers how supportive his teammates and coach were, especially when he didn't have a ride home. Coach Joseph consistently drove him to and from practice. A month later, Tim hung a photograph of his team on his bedroom wall, and that picture became a source of motivation for him to move forward. In the years after their mother's death, the young brothers matured into men who cherished their own families. Jeff married and had 2 children, while Tim also started a family. Over time, both brothers regularly contacted the investigators to inquire about the progress of their mother's case. Although Jeff and Tim had built successful lives for themselves, they remained committed to ensuring the investigation progressed. 17 years after Linda's death, the police continued their investigation. By 1998, Sergeant Edgar Pickett had retired, and Linda Slayton's case was handed over to a new team, with Detective Brad Grace taking on the case. While reviewing the evidence, he discovered unidentified DNA from the Linda case that had been collected in 1981. He sent this DNA to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Major Crime Lab, known as the FDLE. By 1999, the FDLE Crime Lab successfully developed a complete DNA profile of Linda Slayton's unknown killer. After obtaining the DNA profile, he revisited the list of suspects, determined to collect DNA samples from each of them. It was now 2001, and Detective Brad was confident that the DNA match would identify the murderer. He made it a priority to speak with the Slayton brothers first and soon arranged a meeting with them. When the brothers arrived, Detective Brad collected their DNA samples and sent them for testing. The results showed no match, which completely cleared Jeff's name from the case. Next, the investigation focused on Frank Slayton. By this time, Frank had stopped drinking and seemed to have lost some of his aggressive and abusive behavior following Linda's death. During this period, Tim and Jeff were also able to reconnect with their father and heal some past wounds. Frank agreed to provide his DNA for testing, but it did not match the unidentified DNA profile that Detective Brad believed belonged to the murderer. In 2005, Detective Brad submitted the unidentified DNA profile from Linda case to the FBI's National DNA Database, where it was regularly compared with new DNA samples. Throughout his investigation, he eliminated dozens of suspects using DNA evidence. However, he retired in 2015 after dedicating 17 years to the Linda Slayton. After Detective Grace, Linda case was handed over to new detectives Tommy Hathcock and Russell Hurley. 3 years into the investigation, Detective Tommy discovered that the FDLE had developed an innovative technology to identify previously unidentifiable DNA. Seizing this opportunity, he sent the unidentified DNA from Linda case to Cece, a genetic genealogist with the FDLE. Cece uploaded the DNA to a public genealogy website she manages, which generated a list of individuals related to the unidentified killer. She then gathered information from birth and marriage certificates, obituaries, and social media to construct a genetic family tree. As the investigation progressed, Cece developed 3 branches of the family tree for the suspect, ultimately pinpointing the individual most likely responsible for Linda's murder. The DNA profile strongly indicated that he was indeed the murderer. The situation took a surprising turn that even shocked Tim and Jeff. The photo hanging on Tim's bedroom wall featured Joseph, commonly known as Coach Joseph, standing just above his shoulder. After learning the killer's identity, Detective Tommy and Russell investigated Joseph's background. They found a history of crimes, including grand theft through forgery of a will. Although he was never formally charged, the police had collected his palm and fingerprints. You may remember that Sergeant Edgar Pickett found a palm print on the windowsill at the crime scene. This discovery brought hope that the family of the deceased could finally find closure in a cold case that had remained unsolved for over 40 years. Investigators compared the palm prints taken from Linda's windowsill in 1981 with Joseph's palm print and found a match. However, they still needed to compare a recent DNA sample from Joseph with the DNA from Linda's case. They decided to obtain his DNA for testing without his knowledge. The investigators took garbage bags from Joseph's house and examined them at the police station for potential DNA evidence. Among the items, they discovered a piece of medical adhesive tape, which they sent to the crime lab for analysis. While waiting for the DNA results, the detectives further explored Joseph's personal life. He had lived in Kathleen, Florida, for most of his 58 years, just 30 minutes from the crime scene. Joseph had children and grandchildren, and they also got married. After nearly 2 weeks, the crime lab results confirmed that the unknown DNA found matched Joseph's DNA on the medical adhesive tape. Consequently, in December 2019, detectives arrested Joseph and brought him in for questioning. In 1981, Joseph was around 20 years old when he committed a crime. The day after the murder, the police spoke to him over the phone. During this brief call, Joseph claimed he had dropped Tim off after football practice on September 3, 1981, the night before the murder. Despite this, the police did not consider him a suspect at the time. Joseph also told investigators that Linda had invited him over for consensual sex, but the detectives knew this was not true. They suspected that Joseph had been targeting Linda prior to the murder because he frequently picked up Tim for football practice and dropped him off at his home afterward. Additionally, Joseph lived nearby, which raised further suspicion. On the night of September 3, 1981, Joseph dropped Tim off at his house after football practice. Later that evening, when no one was home, he returned to the house and broke in through Linda's bedroom window. He hid in her closet and waited for her to go to bed. Once she was asleep, he attacked her, sexually assaulted her, and ultimately strangled her with a wire hanger from the closet. Joseph pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and sexual battery. During his sentencing, Linda Slayton's family confronted him, asking why he killed her. One family member expressed their pain, saying, "I just want to know why. Why did you take my mom away?" Joseph only replied, "I am a good person," and did not apologize or explain his actions. The judge sentenced Joseph to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the Slayton brothers find some comfort in knowing that Joseph will never be released from prison, they are furious that he enjoyed years of freedom while they grew up without their mother. For Tim, this realization was shocking, especially since Coach Joseph was a role model for him. He recalls that Joseph would often inquire about the case, asking if there had been any updates on finding the culprit. To stay under the radar, Joseph offered his assistance, making things easier for the boys during football practice. He'd ask us how the case was going. He wasn't probing for details, just wanting to know if there was any new information or leads. And I would say, no, nothing. Even now, Tim struggles to accept that the person he trusted most could be his mother's killer. He reflects, "I've had the killer's picture on my table at home all this time and never realized it." Jeff, who is still grieving, often wonders what life would have been like if Linda were still alive. Tim and Jeff have stayed very close after the incident. They often visit their mother's grave, and on the anniversary of her death, Jeff always lights a candle. Despite everything they've been through, they continue to live life to the fullest in her memory. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Ronald Burns. Kiana was born on September 15, 1977, in St. Louis, Missouri. She graduated from Riverview Garden High School and then attended St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley, where she studied cosmetology. After completing her education, she started her own beauty salon, which quickly became very popular. Kiana was worked hard because she dreamed of a luxurious and prosperous life. Her commitment to her business paid off. Over the next 20 years, through her determination and effort, she grew her salon into one of the largest in the St. Louis area. However, Kiana's personal life hasn't always been smooth sailing. As a strong, wealthy, and ambitious woman, she had difficulty finding a suitable life partner. Over the course of her 44 years, she became a mother to 3 children from previous relationships, whom she loves dearly. Her family sees her as a wonderful and caring mother. Kiana was also known for her ability to uplift other women, her loyalty as a friend, and her success in business. She seemed to have everything when she met her future husband, Ronald Burns. Ronald Burns was born on May 14, 1975, in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from the High School of Fashion in 1994, where he was a member of the basketball team and competed in the state championship. He is very ambitious, enjoys competition, and always strives for excellence. When he met Kiana, he already had 2 children from a previous relationship. Their meeting brought together 2 successful and driven individuals, and together they built a new, happy, and joyful family. On September 13, 2012, Ronald and Kiana officially married and celebrated a beautiful wedding surrounded by family and friends. However, shortly after the wedding, Kiana began to discover new aspects of her husband, Ronald. She discovered that he had committed his life to Jesus Christ at a young age and wanted to fulfill his mission to serve others. He started helping everyone he encountered, even those on the street. He also created a personal website where he began coaching and preaching, sharing that God had guided him in his early years to help people. Ronald continued his ministry, and his video messages gained significant popularity online. Besides being a church coach known for his inspiring speeches, he also worked as a financial counselor and insurance agent. He founded a company called Traditional Financial Solutions, with the goal of helping people worldwide achieve financial independence. He found great success in his business, and his speeches attracted large audiences due to his dedication to helping others. Kiana supported her husband, and together they became popular online. Ronald was already a recognized leader and coach in Six-Figure Ambition, an online program for entrepreneurs. He had over 7,000 followers on Instagram and 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, where he shared educational videos. Ronald and Kiana combined their family and business skills, shared their dream, and ended up creating something amazing that has impacted thousands of people. Kiana was a well-known speaker at business events, where she shared valuable lessons and inspiration for achieving success. She had 14,000 followers on Instagram, where she posted about her family life and inspirational quotes. In one of her popular video messages, Kiana and Ronald appeared together, dressed in branded clothing. They discussed entrepreneurship and how it positively impacted their lives and the lives of thousands of their followers. The couple emphasized their mission to teach their audience how to become successful entrepreneurs and establish a solid foundation for their businesses. The Burns family aimed to teach young entrepreneurs the importance of investing their earnings wisely instead of spending them all. Their message emphasized that they believe in anyone who believes in them, highlighting that you don't need to be great to begin, you just need to start to become great. Rather than hiding their luxurious lifestyle, they openly showcased it to inspire and attract new students and subscribers. In the Burns family, only Kiana has followed the path that Ronald often talks about. She has worked hard to create and manage her own network of salons. At the time, Kiana owned several salons and was also a successful insurance agent. Her business provided most of the family's income. Ronald wanted to maintain a successful image, which led to the perception of their family as wealthy, always dressed in expensive clothes. They regularly shared photos from upscale restaurants. However, true wealthy and successful individuals take action rather than just talk. Meanwhile, those less fortunate continue to believe the Burns family's speech, swayed by their stories about making money easily without hard work, relying solely on the guidance of their mentor. Ronald attracted a lot of attention because many people wanted to become rich like his family. In response, he founded a company with ambitious goals, allowing him to grow his wealth lasting, which he often discussed in interviews. The Burns family built an attached relationship, and for a long time, everyone believed in it. However, things changed when Ronald suggested that Kiana move from her cherished hometown of St. Louis to Atlanta. At that point, they had 3 children together, Rhea, Makiai, and Ray. As successful parents and professionals, Ronald and Kiana became inspirational figures admired by many. The move to Atlanta was necessary for their business expansion. Ronald, who owned his wife's salon, had big dreams of growing it beyond the 3 beauty salons they had in St. Louis. He wanted to open a chain of salons in Atlanta to reach more customers. Although initially Kiana was hesitant to leave St. Louis, she ultimately supported her husband and agreed to move to Atlanta. On social media, Kiana shared her luxurious lifestyle, posting a picture of herself receiving a luxury Maserati Levant as a gift from Ronald. She also shared images of her car trunk filled with Louis Vuitton bags, each accompanied by captions expressing her admiration and gratitude toward her husband. Kiana, like many bloggers, often shared pictures of her children and family on her Instagram. However, she eventually revealed to her followers that her family life wasn't as perfect as it appeared. It became clear that she and her husband were close to getting a divorce. After relocating to Atlanta, Kiana found herself alone in a large, unfamiliar city where she had to start all over again. In a video message to her followers, she expressed how difficult it was to make the decision to move and to adapt to a new environment and new people. She stated during a Facebook live stream that everyone had to be prepared for changes in life. Things could improve or deteriorate overnight. She added that if one didn't believe they were strong enough, certain situations could overwhelm them. She shared with her followers that she was going through a tough time and needed their support. Kiana found there to be a great source of encouragement as she faced growing challenges. Meanwhile, she and Ronald were quietly dealing with a serious problem in their relationship and were headed for divorce. This confession unsettled the subscribers, led Ronald to address the situation live on air. He disclosed that they had decided 7 months ago to divorce. He said that he was bored with her and that they would continue to manage the business together, but they officially announced their divorce. He mentioned that they had both come to this decision, and although they would not mind it, everything around them would remain unchanged. They started by drawing a line down the middle of a piece of paper to decide how to split their business. However, bloggers typically share only positive experiences with their audience. Talking about failures and challenges can diminish their credibility, especially for the Burns family, who had spent years building their reputation. Yet, as public figures, it became evident that their wealthy lifestyle was merely a facade for social media. Ronald, in his pursuit of fame, quickly wasted all the money Kiana earned from her beauty salons. The situation worsened for the Burns family, leading to their debt exceeding $500,000 in just a few years. Their move to a new city and the financial problems they faced became too much to bear. On the night before tragic endings, Kiana went live and talked to her channel subscribers. She requested prayers for strength as she faced difficulties without the support of family or friends, especially while taking care of her children. In her post, Kiana discussed the changes in her life and explained that she and her husband had moved to Atlanta only 5 or 6 months earlier to grow their business. Kiana wanted to emphasize that if one didn't pray and maintain their faith, circumstances could shift and lead them astray. She also mentioned the importance of having a group of friends so that can discuss difficult issues together. If people rely only on luck, they can overthink things and make bad decisions. Concluding her speech, she pointed out that changes in life were often challenging, particularly when adapting to new surroundings and meeting new people. Without the support of close family and friends, it can be very challenging. Kiana acknowledged that she is focusing on her mental health and fears she may not be strong enough to face life's challenges. However, the main reason for the family imbalance was the move. During her speech, Kiana did not mention that the real cause of their issues was Ronald's repeated infidelity and promiscuous behavior, which was hidden behind the facade of their seemingly happy life on Instagram. That same night, she shared a video of herself happily dancing at home with one of her daughters. A few hours later, a tragic incident occurred. Kiana and Ronald had a lengthy argument. In a moment of despair, she took a gun and shot him, then turned the gun on herself. Authorities were called to the Burns home, and by the time the police arrived, neighbors had gathered outside, reporting that they heard gunshots from inside. Initial investigations indicated that Ronald had shot himself, but soon after, Kiana's bloody body was found in another room, a gun still in her hands. It became clear that the tragic decision was made by Kiana. While the motives were evident, some speculated that she was compelled to kill Ronald after discovering he had been unfaithful. Others suggested that the couple was deeply in debt and that Ronald was a con artist who had betrayed her trust. Those who believe this have searched deeper into their lives and discovered some very information from Ronald's ex-wife. She stated that during her divorce, she discovered that Ronald was a habitual cheater. Throughout their marriage, he was very careless with his wife's finances and could not maintain any jobs. This eventually led to financial ruin and her credit history was affected. After they got divorced, Ronald met Kiana, a successful career woman who intrigued him. In turn, Kiana was drawn to Ronald's confidence and charm. Ronald and Kiana seemed to be a promising match, combining her financial success with his experience, but their expectations fell short, and all their business ventures ultimately failed. The only business that survived was Kiana's beauty salon. Despite not generating any income, Ronald maintained the appearance of a successful businessman. The family skillfully concealed their financial struggles on social media, frequently showcasing expensive purchases. They also hid their relationship issues by posting joyful pictures together. Ronald continued to share updates about his business projects on his account, asserting that every endeavor he undertook was successful and profitable. The Burns family portrayed themselves as Christians, often including biblical quotes in their posts. They shared images of their lavish home, highlighting their wealth and family life. However, these pictures, whether at home, at parties, in front of cars, or on vacation, served merely as a facade. Ronald worked for an American marketing insurance company, known for exploiting middle and lower-income families. He even attempted to rope in family and friends to participate in this deceitful scheme in a bid to enhance his status. Even so, Ronald did not make enough money from this venture and struggled to support himself. Ronald and Kiana continuously convincing those around them that their new business was thriving and that they were successful entrepreneurs. Their overconfidence was evident when they even created a TV series about their lives, titled Meet the Burns. Despite their claims of success, they quickly spent all their earnings on an extravagant lifestyle, trying to project an image that didn't reflect reality. This reckless spending ultimately led to their financial downfall. On December 19, 2019, Kiana and Ronald officially filed for bankruptcy, requiring them to sell some of their assets to settle their debts. Despite all this, Ronald and Kiana continued as if nothing had happened, maintaining the facade of a happy family and successful business people. However, in St. Louis, it was becoming harder to maintain that illusion. Ronald resolved that they should relocate to a larger city to continue their schemes without consequences. This turned out to be another poor decision on his part. Kiana's beauty salon is still profitable for them, which was their family's only source of income. Sadly, Kiana went along with her husband's plan and agreed to the move once more. Kiana struggled to adjust to life new in Atlanta. She was already aware that her husband had cheated on her multiple times and was exhausted from being patient and quiet about it. They agreed to divorce, but when Ronald filed the papers on October 10, 2021, he claimed Kiana's infidelity as the reason for their separation. Kiana was heartbroken, but she understood reasons, as her family and friends were unaware of the issues between her and Ronald. He concealed the truth from everyone to maintain his reputation. On October 20th, just 10 days after filing for divorce, Kiana appeared on live television to address a more serious matter. Her usual bright smile was replaced by a look of concern and sorrow. After his divorce from his first wife, Ronald had married the successful and wealthy Kiana. Presenting himself as a devoted guru, he appeared reformed and trustworthy. However, he had not truly changed and continued to exploit Kiana's trust and wealth, while pretending to be a successful businessman. On November 9, 2021, what appeared to be a happy marriage ended tragically when 44-year-old Kiana Burns shot and killed her husband, 46-year-old Ronald Burns, before turning the gun on herself. They left behind 8 children who will now grow up without their parents. According to the Sandy Springs Police Department, there was no history of domestic violence in their household. Just weeks prior to this tragedy, Kiana had asked her friends on Facebook for prayers. But the reasons behind her actions remain unclear, leaving many to wonder what could have led to such a drastic decision. It can be challenging to understand the actions of someone struggling with depression and other serious mental health issues. Furthermore, it is especially concerning to witness their children having to fend for themselves without their parents. The news of Ronald and his wife Kiana's deaths has spread quickly among their many friends and colleagues. Their passing has drawn considerable attention on social media, with many friends and followers sharing their grief and fond memories of the couple. Those who knew them best have paid tribute, yet a post from a family friend reveals that even people very close to the couple were unaware of the family's true situation until the end. Ronald had a tendency to show off his success and luxury. He became so absorbed in his self-image that he confused self-worth with self-importance. Like a destructive force, he disrupted the lives of several hardworking and successful women. He is merely a deceitful con man who brought his wives down. He misled women into believing in wonderful dreams of happiness and success that they would only achieve with him. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of William Lewis Reese. On May 16, 1997, 19-year-old Sandra stopped at a gas station in Webster, Texas to make a phone call from a pay phone. After making the call, she got back in her car and started driving, but soon discovered that her tire was flat. Sandra was forced to stop and was considering her options when a man in a white truck, who had been following her, stopped to offer help. The man appeared to be a kind stranger, and Sandra accepted his offer and got into his truck. The man restrained Sandra inside the truck and bound her wrists, then continued driving along Interstate 45. Sandra was terrified at this point and discovered that the truck doors were unlocked. Despite being pregnant, she was forced to jump out of the truck to escape her attacker. Unfortunately, he grabbed her, causing her to be dragged for several miles on the sidewalk. She eventually escaped, but was seriously injured. Sandra was taken to a nearby hospital, where the police were contacted. She described her attacker, but due to her trauma, she was unable to recall important details. That was not enough to arrest the attacker. With no other clues to the attacker's identity, the police decided to hypnotize Sandra. A few months later, while under hypnosis, she recalled important details, including the truck's license plate. The license plate led to a man named William Reese. William Lewis Reese was born on July 1, 1959, in Oklahoma. He was one of 13 siblings. As a child, he lived in the cities of Yukon and Anadarko. Due to his parents' difficult financial situation, he was forced to drop out of school in the 9th grade and work as a farm laborer. William married Judy Flaming in 1979 after she became pregnant. William joined the Oklahoma National Guard, but his time in the Guard was short-lived. His marriage to Judy was also troubled, and the couple divorced just a year after their marriage. Despite this, William convinced Judy to give their marriage another chance. They remarried and had a second child, but their reunion did not last long. William began drinking heavily and abusing Judy. The situation worsened in 1982 when Judy reported to the police that William had beaten her and threatened to kill her with a knife and a shotgun. As a result, Judy filed for divorce from William for the second time. William later remarried, but the marriage did not last long, as his second wife divorced him after only a few months. After the divorce, William continued his life of crime. In April 1986, he kidnapped a 19-year-old woman, the daughter of a Texas sheriff's deputy. The woman was driving to a local gym when her car got stuck. William, who was working as a truck driver at the time, lured her into his truck, promising to take her to the nearest payphone. Once she was in the truck, he tied her up and sexually assaulted her. William drove the victim to a nearby motel where he rented a room. When he allowed her to use the bathroom, she took the opportunity to escape and call the police. William was arrested and charged but released on bail, but a month later he attacked another woman and was arrested again. He was then tried for both crimes, convicted, and sentenced to 25 years in prison. However, William appealed the conviction and had his sentence reviewed. The review found flaws in his case, leading to a reduction in his sentence. As a result, he was paroled in October 1996, after serving only 9.5 years of his original sentence. William moved to his mother's house in Anadarko, Oklahoma, after his release from prison. He then regained his driver's license in early 1997 and moved to Houston, Texas. There, William attempted to kidnap and sexually assault Sandra. This eventually led to his conviction for aggravated kidnapping in 1998 and his sentence of 60 years in prison. But while William was serving his sentence, police suspected him of being involved in many other crimes. It took years to unravel the secrets William had taken with him to prison while many families waited for answers. On the drizzly morning of April 3, 1997, around 9 a.m., 12-year-old Laura Smither asked her mother for permission to go jogging alone around 9 a.m. It was a decision that would prove to be one her mother would regret for the rest of her life. Laura, the daughter of Bob and Gay Smither, grew up in a house in Friendswood with her younger brother. She was known for her kind and gentle nature. Laura was not only an excellent student but also a talented ballet dancer from a very young age. Her dream of becoming a professional ballerina began to take shape after recently being accepted into the prestigious Houston Ballet Academy. When she asked to go for a run that fateful day, her mother was surprised because Laura never went out much. In fact, she didn't even go to school and was homeschooled by her parents. However, Laura had recently been inspired to do cardio to improve her dancing skills and wanted to go for a run while her mother was cooking breakfast. Her mother allowed her to go for a short run because she never thought anything bad would happen to her. Laura's parents began to panic when she didn't return after a few hours. She was always closely supervised and had never been out alone for so long, so they knew something was wrong. Laura's father searched the neighborhood but found no sign of her. Initially, they thought she would return soon, but as the hours passed, they realized something was wrong. The parents then contacted Laura's relatives and friends to see if anyone had any information about her whereabouts, but no one had any. After an unsuccessful search, they contacted the police to file a missing person report. Laura's father explained the situation to the police. "My daughter went jogging this morning, but she was gone much longer than I expected." The investigation into Laura's disappearance began, and her family immediately received support from the community. Volunteers, holding Laura's photo in their hands, went door to door asking residents if they had any information about the missing 12-year-old. However, their efforts stopped when night fell. The next morning, the police began an active search for Laura. A foot search party was deployed to the forest, while helicopters were also used to search for potential clues. Unfortunately, no clues were found during this time. Despite the lack of progress, community morale remained high, with hundreds of volunteers joining the search effort. The search continued for a week, with 6,000 volunteers involved. The National Coast Guard, along with the FBI, also joined the local police department to assist in the search. Although the possibility that Laura had become lost in the woods was initially considered, by this point in the investigation, police suspected foul play. Hoping to continue the search, the community held candlelight vigils and prayers in Laura's name, keeping alive the hope of finding her. However, another week passed without any leads in the case. On Sunday, April 20th, 1997, a meeting was held at Friendswood High School to discuss the next steps in the search. During the meeting, the sheriff received a phone call, causing his expression to become anxious, causing concern among those present, who wondered what had happened. Around 10 p.m., Laura's parents received heartbreaking news. Laura's body had been found near a Pasadena reservoir, 12 miles from where Laura had disappeared. A man walking his dog discovered Laura's badly decomposed body in a muddy area. She was wearing only a pair of socks. 17 days after Laura went missing, her body was finally found, but in a brutal and tragic state. She had been brutally beaten and strangled to death. The news sent shockwaves through the Friendswood community, leaving residents heartbroken and fearful that a predator was on the loose and could target others. Determined to catch the perpetrator, the police acted quickly. However, they had no information about the person responsible for this heinous crime. In an effort to gather leads, they began interviewing local sex offenders. Soon, William Lewis Reese came to their attention. William, 38, was working at Windsor Estate in Friendswood as an equipment operator. Curiously, on the day of Laura's disappearance, he left work around the time Laura went missing and returned 30 minutes later. However, even after an extensive investigation, police found no solid evidence linking him to the crime. As a result, the case remained unsolved for many years. Kelly Cox was a 20-year-old student who went on a field trip to the local Denton prison on July 15, 1997, with her classmates for a criminology class. Before entering the prison, she parked her car in the parking lot across from the police station and hid the spare key in a magnetic box under the car. Following the professor's instructions, she locked her other belongings, including her cell phone, in the car. After completing the prison tour at noon, Kelly quickly left because she had to take a test that day at the University of North Texas, where she was a student. Kelly tried to leave by unlocking the car door with the spare key. But it did not work. She had checked the key the night before and it was fine. Kelly was unable to use her cell phone, so she went to a nearby gas station to use a public phone to call her boyfriend, Lawrence Harris III, for help. After the call, she went inside the gas station, bought a drink, and disappeared. Lawrence arrived about 45 minutes later, but Kelly's car was still in the parking lot and she was nowhere to be found. Her keys and key fob were also missing. Lawrence searched for Kelly but could not find her. He then called Kelly's mother to check if she had returned home, but she had not. At the time, the situation seemed suspicious, but Kelly's family decided to wait a little longer to see if she returned. However, their concerns grew as time went on. By 5:30 p.m., they believed something was wrong. This was the time Kelly was supposed to pick up her 19-month-old daughter, Alexis, from her babysitter. Knowing Kelly was a responsible mother, They realized that it was unusual for her to miss this appointment or not arrange for someone else to pick up Alexis. After the missing persons report was filed, police immediately began searching for Kelly. As is standard procedure in missing persons cases, they began questioning those closest to her. The first person they looked at was her boyfriend, Lawrence, but he was cleared as a suspect after passing 4 polygraph tests. A subsequent tip led them to another suspect, William Lewis Reese, who was also a suspect in the Laura Smither case. Although William did not live in Denton at the time of Kelly's disappearance, a gas station receipt placed him in the area on the same day Kelly went missing. Given William's history as a sex offender, he became a priority suspect, prompting police to search his car for any sign of Kelly, specifically her fingerprints. However, no fingerprints were found, leaving police with no further evidence linking William to Kelly's disappearance. With no leads, no witnesses, and no surveillance footage, the case quickly went cold and remained so for years to come. Kelly's disappearance was difficult for her mother and stepfather, as they had to raise Alexis on their own. As the years passed, Kelly never returned to her daughter, but following in her mother's footsteps, Alexis continued to attend the same college as Kelly, holding out hope that her mother would one day return. Over the years, Kelly's loved ones continued to share her story and circulate her photo, never giving up hope that she would return home. Unfortunately, their wishes have yet to come true. Jessica Kane, a 17-year-old high school student, was reported missing by her mother on August 17, 1997. At approximately 1:30 a.m. that morning, Jessica had left a cast party at Bennigan's on Bay Avenue Boulevard after a concert in Dickinson, Texas. The party was attended by her friends from the show. When her mother found out that Jessica had not returned home, she began calling the friends who had been with her that night. They confirmed that Jessica had left the party but had not returned home. Born on August 28, 1979, Jessica was known for her cheerful personality, love of sports and passion for drama, and was captain of the drill team at O'Connell High School in Galveston, Texas. Jessica's parents immediately became concerned that something had happened to her. When her father went to look for her, he discovered her car parked near the Lomark exit off the highway with her valuables still inside. He immediately contacted the police, who along with hundreds of volunteers were involved in the search for Jessica. During this difficult time, Jessica's parents met Bob and Gay Smither, who were also searching for their missing daughter, Laura. Laura Smither's family, who were also going through their own horrific nightmare, remained steadfast in their support of Jessica's parents and joined the search. Despite the efforts of the police and community to find Jessica, no sign or evidence of her turned up. The police began to suspect foul play and thought the chances of finding Jessica alive were extremely low. After weeks of searching, the case was dropped. But Jessica's family never gave up on finding answers. We are being forced to learn patience, an extremely difficult lesson, to wait, to be calm, and to trust in God. Tiffany Johnson was a 19-year-old woman who went missing on July 26, 1997. Her car was found abandoned at a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma, but there was no sign of her. Born on April 6, 1978, to Michael and Kathy Dobe, Tiffany is the youngest daughter in her family. She is very close to her family, especially her mother. Tiffany grew up as a cheerful and active girl in a small town. She enjoyed spending time outdoors, often helping her grandfather with his gardening and taking care of plants. After graduating from high school in 1996, Tiffany married Ryan Johnson in 1997 and moved to Bethany, Oklahoma with him. To save money for college, she took on 2 jobs while planning to enroll in Oklahoma State University and study botany. However, her plans never came to fruition. On July 26, 1997, Tiffany finished her part-time shift at a restaurant around 2 p.m. She was excited to celebrate her 3-month wedding anniversary with her husband, Ryan, and had planned to meet him at 11 p.m. Before leaving, Tiffany returned home, showered, and drove off in her white Dodge Neon. Tiffany went to the Sunshine Car Wash to have her car washed. She was never seen again. Her husband began searching for her that night, checking her home and other possible locations, but she was nowhere to be found. Around midnight, a Bethany police officer stumbled upon Tiffany's abandoned car at the car wash. Police found the car door open, the keys still in the ignition, and found Tiffany's wallet inside. In the glove box, police found Tiffany's mother's phone number. However, when police contacted Tiffany's mother, Kathy, who lived 60 miles away in Anadarko, she had no information about her daughter's disappearance. Tiffany's husband, Ryan, was the next person police contacted, but he also had no information about his wife's whereabouts. At this point, it was clear that something was wrong. Before police could begin searching for Tiffany, a disturbing discovery was made on July 27, 1997, near the intersection of I-40 and Gregory Street. A search party looking for another missing girl stumbled upon the body of a young white woman. Police suspected that the body might be Tiffany's as soon as they arrived on the scene. After being shown a photo of the victim, Ryan quickly confirmed that it was indeed his wife. An autopsy could not determine the exact time of her death, but it indicated that she had been the victim of sexual assault and strangulation. Police collected and preserved an unidentified DNA sample found on her body as evidence. With no leads on a suspect, police initially focused on the husband, Ryan, as a potential suspect in his wife's death. However, an alibi soon came to light, revealing that Ryan had been at work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. on the day Tiffany was last seen. Tiffany's last known whereabouts were at the car wash at 6 p.m. Just when the investigation seemed to be stalling, a crucial clue emerged. It was revealed that Tiffany's cause of death involved sexual assault, as well as severe head and shoulder trauma. The car wash owner soon contacted the police, reporting that a suspicious person, matching the description of a man wanted for kidnapping in Texas a few months earlier, had been seen at the car wash on the same day Tiffany went missing. That man was none other than William Lewis Reese. His mother was a close friend of Tiffany's mother, and William even called Tiffany's mother, Kathy, after her daughter's death to offer his condolences. However, William was able to evade justice for a while, as the police investigation into Tiffany's murder failed to produce any evidence implicating him. Years later, in 2015, police made a significant breakthrough in the case thanks to advances in DNA technology. A DNA sample collected during Tiffany's autopsy was retested and matched a profile in a national database, known as CODIS, linking William to the crime. William was then charged in Oklahoma City with Tiffany's 1997 kidnapping and murder. Just as his trial was about to begin, William suddenly confessed to other crimes in an attempt to negotiate a deal with the prosecution. William had eluded police for nearly 19 years, despite having a serious criminal history, including armed kidnapping. Police suspected him of murdering Laura Smither and of being involved in the disappearances of Jessica Kane and Kelly Cox. To confirm their suspicions, they showed him photos of the 3 victims. William quickly admitted responsibility but denied any sexual motive behind the crimes. William agreed to reveal the location of Kelly and Jessica's remains in order to avoid facing the death penalty. In April 2016, he led police to a site in a Houston pasture where human remains were discovered. After several days of excavation, the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed that the remains belonged to Jessica Kane. The search then shifted to a separate burial site in Brazoria County, where another set of remains were found. Using dental records, police identified the remains as those of Kelly Cox. The trial for the murder of Tiffany Johnston took place in May 2021 in Oklahoma County District Court. A jury found William Lewis Reese guilty on May 28, 2021. The judge then sentenced William to death on August 19, 2021, for the kidnapping and murder of Tiffany. After his conviction, William was extradited to Texas in March 2022 to stand trial for the murders of Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, and Jessica Kane. William pleaded guilty to all 3 murders and was sentenced to life in prison in June 2022. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Kenneth Keith. Michael Hawkinsmith, 35, was born in Danville, Kentucky. He was a well-known pastor at a local church in his community. After many years of service there, he chose to take a job at a local pawn shop named ABC, while still working part-time as a pastor. Due to health issues faced by the previous owner, Michael eventually took over the pawn shop. Michael was an honest and helpful person, which allowed him to easily build relationships with customers. In his personal life, he was married to Angela, and they had 2 children, Andrew and Naomi. Michael and Angela owned a pawn shop called ABC Gold, Games and More, located in Danville, Kentucky. They homeschooled their 9-year-old son, Andrew, and cared for their newborn daughter, Naomi. Andrew frequently visited the pawn shop and saw it as his play area. On the morning of September 20, 2013, the Hawkinsmiths visited the ABC store as intended. During that morning, Dan Smith, a frequent visitor to the pawn shop, arrived as scheduled. Smith, often referred to as the Gold Man, specialized in trading gold between pawn shops throughout the state. Approximately 15 minutes after the store opened, while Michael and Smith were conducting their business, a bearded man entered the store and instructed everyone to get on the ground, leading to a series of alarming events. Andrew was at the ABC store when his mother, Angela, told him to hide. Sensing the tense situation, he quickly called the police to report what was happening. 6 minutes after the alarm was raised, the police arrived at the murder scene. When they entered the building, they discovered a significant trail of blood that led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. They then found his wife, Angela, 38, and another victim, Dan Smith, 60, a broker, on the opposite side of the counter. All 3 victims had sustained severe injuries from gunshot wounds to their heads and bodies. Police later discovered 9-year-old Andrew and 14-month-old Naomi hiding in a closet. They had endured unimaginable trauma and were left without their parents, becoming orphans. While investigating the crime scene, police discovered 14 spent shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase belonging to Dan Smith. Notably, the victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the register were left untouched, indicating that robbery was not the motive. The investigation was further complicated by the absence of surveillance cameras at the pawn shop, requiring police to look for potential witnesses. An employee from Rainbowy Cleaners, a nearby dry cleaning business, offered crucial information by describing a vehicle that had been parked near the shop that morning. The vehicle involved was a silver pickup truck, driven by a large man with a bushy beard. While one team of investigators searched the area, another team had the difficult task of informing the victim's closest relatives about the tragedy. Michael's parents were heartbroken by the news but felt grateful that their grandchildren, Andrew and Naomi, had survived. The tragic news also reached the daughter of the 3rd victim, Dan Smith. Dan was involved in buying precious metals and was knowledgeable about his field, which helped him connect with various people. His business often required him to handle large sums of cash, sometimes reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars. Police began to suspect that Dan Smith might have been the main target of the criminal. Through surveillance, they learned that before visiting the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop, Dan Smith had stopped at the Lawson Jewelry Store in Harrodsburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. Inside the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera installed on the far wall, which recorded every customer who entered and exited. They wanted to see if anyone was following Dan Smith. At 8:16 a.m., Dan Smith entered the store, and there were no other customers present at that time. Dan Smith was seen carrying a briefcase that looked exactly like the one later discovered at the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. He smiled at the woman working behind the counter and then walked toward the back of the store. A short time later, he came back into view on the footage, talked briefly with an elderly woman who had just walked in, and then left the store quickly. The footage from the exterior camera did not reveal any suspicious activity. The police could only keep an eye on the man, not realizing that he would soon be involved in a tragic incident. Andrew Hawkinsmith was taken to the police station to give his testimony. He explained that he was at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith entered carrying a bag of money. While Michael and Dan were having a conversation, a stranger entered and demanded the bag of money right away. Andrew reported that Dan Smith quickly handed his bag of money to a stranger. He mentioned that his father asked the man to stop, but the man shot his father with a handgun that looked like the one Andrew usually played with. Following this, his mother told him to take his younger sister, Naomi, to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew grabbed his sister and found a hiding spot. At that moment, the criminal aimed a gun at Angela. The 9-year-old boy suspected the stranger was after money. He described the stranger as a very tall man with a fake-looking beard, matching what a witness from Rainbow Cleaners had reported. During their investigation, the police looked closely at the Hawkinsmith family's business. They found out that the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop was actually owned by Steve Devine. Usually, he was present during transactions on Fridays with Dan Smith, but on the morning of September 20th, he was not there. This absence raised alarms, and finding out where he was became a major priority. Steve Devine reported an allergic reaction that morning, leading him to cancel all his appointments. His wife supported his account. Additionally, his alibi and the absence of a silver pickup truck in his possession helped clear him as a suspect. Steve Devine explained that there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop because the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith, had removed the security system. The new owner had not yet installed a replacement. Kenneth Allen Keith, 48, is a pastor, just like Michael Hawkinsmith. After being diagnosed with brain cancer, he sold his pawn shop. However, he still owns a similar business called Gold Rush Buyers, located in Pulaski County near Danville's Bowles District. Kenneth and Michael have been friends for 15 years, a bond that started when Michael worked at a church youth camp. The Hawkinsmith family held a deep respect for Pastor Kenneth, who was like a cherished uncle to Andrew. As investigators lacked significant leads, they opted to review the street surveillance footage from around ABC Gold Games and More, as well as several pawn shops. They discovered a camera located on the office building of Danville Rentals, a real estate company. The surveillance video recorded a silver pickup truck at 8:45 a.m., but the footage was too blurry to identify the license plate or the make of the vehicle. However, eyewitness testimony from Rainbow Cleaners was crucial in helping the police identify the vehicle involved. The witness noted that the vehicle was an older model with a unique square body shape. The video evidence also clearly displayed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the vehicle indicated that the police may have located the criminal's vehicle. They then expanded their search to surveillance systems further away from the pawn shop. At 8:17 a.m., cameras at Ephraim McDowell Hospital recorded the same vehicle. Investigators confirmed that it was a silver Dodge pickup truck. Dan Smith's family was heartbroken by his death. Though they were filled with sadness, they attended the funeral and managed to control their anger. Meanwhile, the Danville police appealed to the public for any information about the crime or the vehicle involved. On September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Hurl, a pastor from Warren, Michigan. He said he was a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they talked about the Danville murders. During that conversation, Kenneth seemed different. Pastor Kenneth told Tracy that he was driving to Danville that day to get medication for his wife. Kenneth also expressed feelings of guilt about the situation, as he had allowed Michael Hawkinsmith to take over his former business. It became clear that Kenneth's relationship with the Hawkinsmith family was not as people had perceived. Tracy reported a conversation with Kenneth in which Kenneth accused Michael of being a fraud and claimed that Michael tried to take over his business. This raised suspicions and led to Kenneth being considered a suspect. To confirm Kenneth's alibi, investigators planned to check the surveillance footage from Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where Kenneth stated he bought medication for his wife at 9:24 a.m. Surveillance footage shows that Kenneth entered the pharmacy. However, just a few minutes before, he was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which are significant features of a suspect. This does not eliminate the possibility that Kenneth could still be involved in the attack. Notably, there was a 6-minute interval between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and Kenneth's arrival at the pharmacy. The police investigated whether it was feasible to travel from the crime scene to Good Neighbor Pharmacy in just a few minutes. They determined that the trip took approximately 5 minutes, suggesting that Kenneth could have committed the murder, quickly driven to the pharmacy, and created a convincing alibi. Additionally, a key piece of evidence was that Kenneth owned a silver, unregistered 2008 Dodge pickup truck. All the evidence gathered was circumstantial and insufficient for an arrest. As a result, the investigators asked Tracy Hurl to take part in a series of staged phone calls targeting Kenneth. Thankfully, Tracy agreed to help. During these calls, Kenneth eventually expressed his real feelings about the Hawkinsmith family. Everyone had been anticipating this moment. Kenneth started talking about details of the case that had not been revealed before. He stated that he was in Danville, specifically at the pharmacy. He confirmed that he was at the pharmacy during the events in question. Kenneth then clarified that he had left Danville and gone back to Somerset. After that, he drove to the car wash to get ready for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 a.m., camera footage recorded Kenneth walking down the hallway to the cash register with a clear smile on his face. Additional footage from outside the building captured Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25 a.m., which aligns with earlier images from various surveillance cameras in Danville. At that stage, police had sufficient evidence to arrest Kenneth. However, when they proposed a lie detector test to determine his involvement in the case, he responded oddly. He stated that he wouldn't be able to pass the test because, during his military service, he had been involved in special missions where he had killed several individuals. Investigators carried out a search warrant at Kenneth's pawn shop and uncovered crucial evidence. They found a fake beard and a large amount of cash, but there was no legal explanation for how he acquired it. Notably, they also discovered bundles of money tied with a ribbon, labeled with the name of the bank that issued them, suggesting that Dan Smith was a customer. Further investigation showed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a deceased broker, raising suspicions about his involvement. Moreover, investigators discovered several .22 caliber shell casings in the pawn shop. Ballistic analysis confirmed that these casings were fired from the same type of weapon used to shoot Andrew and Naomi's parents. Kenneth Allen Keith faced 3 charges: first-degree murder, 3 counts, and robbery. He thought that Michael and Steve were plotting to oust him from the business. Despite his beliefs, there was no evidence to support that Michael and Steve were involved in any conspiracy. When Kenneth met Dan Smith at the pawn shop, he attempted to devise a fake scheme to convince the police that the case was a robbery. However, the plan backfired when the police investigated and found no evidence of any wrongdoing by Michael and Steve. On September 20th, Kenneth drove his silver Dodge Caravan to Danville. He drove around the pawn shop until he spotted Dan Smith's car parked nearby. Kenneth then shot and killed Dan Smith, Michael Hawkinsmith, and Angela Hawkinsmith. After stealing all the cash, Kenneth calmly left the scene of the crime and went to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy. This visit was recorded by surveillance cameras, which helped him create a false alibi. Kenneth chose to wash his car in what seems to be an effort to eliminate any possible evidence that could be on it. Before his sentencing in 2017, Kenneth Allen Keith admitted guilt to all charges brought against him and was consequently sentenced to life in prison. In reflecting on the tragic events surrounding the Hawkinsmith family and Dan Smith, it's clear that this story resonates deeply with many. The heartbreak felt by the community underscores the fragility of trust, especially when betrayal comes from those we consider friends. As the investigation unraveled the chilling motives of Kenneth Allen Keith, it served as a poignant reminder of how quickly a normal day can transform into a nightmare. The innocence of the children, caught in such horrific circumstances, evokes a sense of profound empathy and admiration for their resilience. Furthermore, this case highlights the essential need for safety measures in our communities, reminding us of the importance of vigilance and awareness in our everyday lives. While the final sentencing brought some sense of justice, the emotional scars left on the families and the broader community will linger long after. Ultimately, may we take these lessons to heart, cherishing our loved ones and fostering a spirit of compassion and understanding in the face of unimaginable sorrow.